We gained about a third of these students back in our FTE counts, and in FY23, another third of the students. This next slide I just kind of put in here for informational purposes so that you guys could actually see the FY23 changes by the 18th.
I'm going to interrupt you for just 1 second.
Yes, sir.
We're getting word that the folks online can't hear you, so I'm going to...
Okay, I'll talk. Is this better?
If we can get a little... We don't know if it's our issue or if it's yours, but let's make sure it's not our issue right here. We're good now? Okay. So if you don't mind, we're going to get a little closer to the mic, too. Thank you so much. Sorry for interrupting you.
Oh, no problem. As I said, this slide is more for informational purposes. So now I'll discuss the significant changes in the governor's recommendation for our FY23 budget. As you can see on this slide, the most significant change is a QBE increase to the per member per month contributions for the state health benefit plan. This is approximately $420 million. In QBE, there is also $128 million for the midterm adjustment for growth. The state charter school supplement had $28 million increase for 4 new schools. Our special needs scholarship increased $6.4 million. In the amended FY23, there are also 3 significant other recommendations in our QBE program. The school security grant of $115.7 million, the paraprofessionals grant of $15 million, and the learning loss grant of $25 million. All right, now let's look at our FY24 budget. Similar to the FY23 amended, there's an increase in the enrollment of about $155 million. And also the state health benefit plan increase, which in 24 is $840 million. There's also $27 million to fully fund the school counselor ratio for all QBE categories. $290 million was added to increase the state-based teacher salary by $2,000. And our equalization formula increased $122 million. This last slide shows some other significant recommendations in our FY24 budget. As you can see, there's a 5.1% increase across these various programs for salary. There's a local 5 mil negative, $257 million. This isn't an increase in that program. And lastly, I think it's important to note that the governor's recommended budget also includes a hold harmless for our school nurse program. Without this provision, there would be a formula reduction to the program. So, thank you. Question?
Superintendent, you got several questions. The board's lighting up. I didn't know if do y'all have anything else in your presentation or ready to roll? Okay. We'll start here at the front. Looks like Senator Hickman.
Thank you, sir. My only question is on the security grant, the $100 something million. Is there any guidelines on how that's going to be administered and what kind of qualifications schools got to have in order to meet that? I mean, are we just talking about additional police officers around the schools, or are we talking about metal detectors going into schools? Like, you know, I've heard on the way in this morning about the young girl stabbed the other girl with a pocket knife here and somewhere around this area.
Yeah,
are there guidelines at this point on that?
Okay.
We have been I think it's going to work similar to the last one, but we have not received the guidelines yet from the governor's office. I do know there'll be specific allowable uses. We just haven't actually received what that idea is yet, but we will communicate it once we do.
Yeah, at this time, again, I think the question that went to as far as personnel, police officers, resource officers, again, with this is just I think a one-time, so it is not something that, extends. So if anything were to happen in that area, again, districts would have to be mindful that they would have to, end up taking up that cost, past this initial investment.
Thanks.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The new dean of the house, Dean Green.
Dean Green. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that very much. And my question, in the 9 counties that I represent, we're building new schools or renovating new schools. We're out of money, and we haven't even gotten started yet, really, because of COVID, the cost overruns and things like this, what are the locals, how can we help the locals in this situation?
Well, I think, of course, a lot of this, again, is formula-driven. You're talking about capital outlay and, planning there. It may look at, some of this, even as I guess handled through local, the sales tax as well, even though there are some restrictions with that. And of course, knowing your district, you have a very poor district, with a lot of these counties, which not a lot of business and industry there. So it does cut into that. I think that as we continue to look, if there's ways in which we can look at flexibility, and maybe revisiting the capital outlay program, because it really, as the formula is laid out, we're kind of subject to that. So it may require, having some discussions with you as members to look at, what budgetary, flexibility we can receive. I don't know, Russ, if you want to add anything with that.
I think that's pretty much, it's working with your facility directors and your finance directors in your individual counties on your,
Okay, yeah.
working with your facility directors and your finance directors in your counties on their capital outlay plans. I think that could go a long way, but as Superintendent mentioned, working with you guys on maybe some alternative ways to fund.
One more, Mr. Chairman. We have cut out of a lot of the, in the design already, and we're still short. And so to help these particular counties, we're going to need someone to meet with our groups as they come to the Capitol, and I would hope that we could do that and meet with them and see where we can go, what we can do in the appropriations position too here.
Okay, sure, we'll be glad to meet with anyone that comes up, whether it's a collective group, your RISA group, we'll try to extend an invitation and see what we can do to further these discussions.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Chairman Walker, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Superintendent, good to see you this morning.
Yes, sir.
The increase in the state health benefit plan contribution, we talked about this. This was brought up yesterday. I think we're going from $945, $950 a month per employee to $1,580. Is the state fully funding that increase, or is there a local share? That's my first question. And then the follow-up is, you're talking about $840 million. That's not too far from $1 billion. How is this sustainable, and what are we doing to address this? That's just a shocking figure.
Yeah, okay. That's it, Russ.
Yeah, I think, honestly, I think that's more of a question for the state health. They don't let me see their books, but they have, when we found out about that, the 1540, I believe, is just for the certified teachers in the programs, and then across the other various programs, we really haven't been given any guidelines as to what that means as far as the future, or the, how that's going to be, how the investment's going to be need to made to continue the services we get. So I would have to defer to them.
So the first part of my question, is there a local share in addition to that 840, or is that?
No, I believe the 1580 covers the employer share for those employees that are under that classification.
Can I follow up, Mr. Chairman? So is there a cost to the locals on the non-certified? Is it going to 1580 also?
Those are questions that we have not been given answers. That's a very good question. We've actually internally asked the same question, and we'll be reaching out to the governor's office and the state health benefit plan to find out for our districts.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
But again, to answer the question, it potentially could have an impact on the local district. Yeah.
Chairman Perkle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Superintendent, this is a question I probably should know, and I apologize. I'm right beside you here.
Okay, right. Yeah.
I probably should know, but it jumps out, curriculum development. The fiscal year 21 was $8.5 million. Expended in 22 was 33.6 million, 25 million more, and then it goes back in the 24 budget of 9.5. I can't recall why the expenditures for curriculum development was so much more. It just seems to be an outlier.
Yeah, I think, Russ, you want to? The curriculum.
Yeah, I'm looking into it.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, now what some of this, I think that as we looked at, we had 2 programs, especially we're looking at English language arts and also with math standards. So I know there was some adjustment of that. Some of that came from the ESSER money, and I don't know that it reflects that, Russ.
I probably should have asked this before the thing, and we can speak offline on that.
Yeah, I think that would be, let us do some research and we'll get back to you. I know there's some additional line items that were in there, but I want to go back and break it down for you. Yes, sir.
Chairman Dugan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Statement and a question. Dean Green, I know a good school builder for you to help you out with your costs, so get with me afterwards. I'll get you. The question I really have for y'all, and I saw it this weekend in the paper, was about school nutrition. I understand during the pandemic we got in a spot where we were funding a lot of the nutrition programs, and it seems like it's how are we going to move forward with that? I'll just put it straight out there.
Yeah, well, I know that we did continue to approach the federal government. Typically, they handle, I guess, our nutrition program through ag. We were disappointed we did not get some of the extension of waivers that we were hoping to get that would help continue to fund that. I think we continue to work with our congressional leadership to see what can be done at the federal level, and try to press that as forward. Again, as we look at ways in which we can continue to fund, I look forward to working with our new ag commissioner, Tyler Harper, to see what we can do in conjunction with each other to make some adjustments as we need. Definitely trying to fund and provide resources for our state, trying to buy more things in state as well, as much as we possibly can. So I think that helps giving our school districts flexibility. But at the end of the day, we still are, I could say, somewhat burdened with federal bureaucracy, and what we do, we have to get approval from them. So it's a kind of a joint effort between us as a state, but largely a lot of that funding comes from the federal government and their I guess guidelines of what we have to follow. But like I said, unfortunately, we did reach out to them. We did try to get some adjustments, but they did not go with an extension of the waivers at this time.
Representative Hughley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Superintendent, can you speak more about the issue of learning loss and what these funds are going to be utilized for, or how do you see this program developing across the state?
Well, I think across the state, when we talk about learning loss, and again, I think it's more of opportunity to learn. What we did find out, and I think as we continue to receive the data, this was really our first solid year as far as testing. When we look at milestones, trying to see the impact of those that districts that were out extensively versus those that were in school. By and large, we found out that, we did fairly well, especially compared to other states as we, continue to move forward. Our SAT, ACT scores continue to beat the national average. By and large, our milestones tests were pretty solid. We're continuing to appreciate the governor and with within this budget, an extension of services that will help that. We continue to work with our after-school programs. We have established a rural education and innovation team that is working in conjunction with that. Dr. Stephanie Johnson and our school improvement is working with our districts to better coordinate the extension of those funds, how they're used. But unfortunately, I think that right now this is probably our second, third year. We're just going to have to look at the information and see what truly impact it has had throughout the state. But we're aggressively, making adjustments, and our districts are doing things in school, out of school, to address, the learning loss that has taken place. So I think we're being as creative as we possibly can, adjusting and allowing our districts to meet that, because the pandemic, it looked different in every district. So, it's not something we could easily say is a one-size-fits-all approach, and I think we've been very effective in allowing our districts to make those adjustments.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Just anecdotally, can you tell us what you're seeing on some statistic, maybe third grade reading level? What are you seeing post-pandemic?
With third grade level, again, was not necessarily out of the norm than what we saw in the past. I think, like today, everything is very accessible, where, anything that, as far as, figures that are out there, we can make it up. I'm very comfortable with that, again, especially in the K-8, when you look at our testing, again, looking across the board. In some areas, we apparently did not seem to lose really anything. In a couple of cases, yes, there were, I think, with some of the learning, but I think we actually saw more learning, I think, within the math area. So that was something we're going to continue to adjust. We do have new English language arts standards that are being looked at, so again, I'm excited about that. But at the end of the day, with our kids, what we have found out, they may not start in the strongest position that we would like, but over the years since taking office, our graduation rate has moved from, I think, about 69 to 84%. So we are seeing, positive growth there. Again, as I'd mentioned, with our ACT and SAT scores, we are beating the national average. So our kids are doing well. Their expansion, when you look at career tech opportunities, and again, I appreciate Commissioner Dozier and his team, and and our collaboration there. So when I look at things, you have to take it kind of field by field, grade by grade, and it may be something that's unique to just a cohort of students. So again, that's why we need probably just a few years to say, hey, what does this look like? Either being able to follow a cohort of students, or seeing, is this something transitory, per grade level that we look at. But right now, our districts are doing the testing. They're doing we have actually throughout the state, we have something called Beacon. It is a formative test that is free to every single district. So we are providing resources that allow our districts to monitor where their kids are and make those adjustments. So, we can give you specific information. Be glad to, work with Dr. Timberlake to give that. But by and large, we're in good shape throughout the state. And anything that we have seen as a loss it can be overcome within, a reasonable time frame.
Representative Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Superintendent, over here.
Okay.
Hi, good morning.
Morning.
As the elected official that has the most interaction on a day-to-day basis, I believe, with the QBE formula, what's your opinion on whether it's time for us to revamp that, given that it's approximately 40 years old?
Well, I was teaching, I guess, when QBE was first kind of initiating in its phase. It dates back to 1985. Definitely, I can tell you, life in a classroom looked much different. As I tell everybody, there was nothing smart on the board except, what you put on there with chalk. And I think technology was something we did not have. That was an era in which you really did not have, anything as far as technology. Does the funding formula need to be adjusted? Yes, it does. You're looking at an area which we are servicing more kids. We are servicing more initiatives across the board. Technology has changed that. Just transportation is definitely, a critical need area, because whether you have one kid and he's out there 20 or 30 miles from school, we still have to pick those kids up. So I think you're looking at challenges that with transportation. I think, I've seen various initiatives to overhaul QBE. It would be my recommendation that instead of a complete overhaul, that we begin to maybe, kind of piecemeal it, look at what is, definitely more viable or more important, and make some adjustments on a smaller scale, so that we, basically don't, turn over the apple cart all at once. I think that would be more tolerable, I think, for you as members of the General Assembly, but also out in the districts, so that we can measure and see, the impact of those changes and be able to make corrections as needed. So my recommendation, yes, it does need to be overhauled, but I think it needs to be a little bit measured and smaller in scope, so that we can address certain needs that are more a priority.
Chairman Irwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, Chairman Dugan, you beat me to the punch. Dean, I happen to know a good contractor too, and they'd be willing to work with you also down there. Superintendent, first of all, thank you. Thank you for the effort, what you and your staff does every day for the children in this state. Could we back up one slide that you have there for a moment? And it might be on the previous slide. I want to talk about the counseling and any direction that you have from I believe it was 28 or 27 million up there. There it is for the school counselors. How can that money be used by the schools? Are you going to lower the number of students that a counselor will oversee, or are the schools allowed to use this in the fashion that they fit their systems?
Well, I think that we're definitely in discussion with what is the intent of the governor of how this is going to be used or should use. I know with some things that we've had some discussions of looking at, should it be career counseling? Doing some things, especially the high school and maybe the latter part of middle school, of looking at thinking about that prep. That definitely is an area of need. Definitely, as we can look at trying to reduce the number of or our ratio as counselors to students. I think that that's something where it could range anywhere from 500 to 700 kids per counselor, trying to make sure that we can actually have the people to fill those positions. Again, that is a big area as well. I think we do have this additional funding as well appreciated, but I think we're having an issue with finding qualified individuals to fill those positions as well. So I think that as we get more direction from the governor and the intent there, again trying to look at where is that money. I think we have to do some research and look at, is it something that by giving us some career counselors, do we free up our current counselors to do more of a job? So I think they could potentially handle that. I think that, looking at other districts to find out, who's been very successful with looking at that funding. I think that, for myself, even reaching out to our chambers to see is there, a different stream of money that's there. With business and industry, I think we've had some great conversations with them, and it may be an area in which we can reach out to them where they can fund a career counselor. I think local chambers of commerce have been open to that, and I think that's the discussion we need to have to expand the opportunity to invest so that we can make sure that we have the right personnel doing the right task that they're doing. But that being said, definitely I think trying to reduce our ratio has to be a top priority because again, when you're looking at one person per 500 to 700 kids, and typically what you find out, a lot of your counselors, especially in school districts, they're probably over your testing, and they have that other duties as assigned. So we've got to look at and have conversations with our local districts to see, are we, misusing or misappropriating their time as well.
Commissioner, thank you for your presentation. It's also the time. We're going to try to squeeze two more in here who've been on the board the entire time.
Sure.
So if you don't mind, I'm asking them to ask their question directly and you to answer their question directly, and we'll move to the next one. Senator Parent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Superintendent Woods. Good to see you. Thanks for your work. My question is about the program that we started working on within the last several years about dyslexia screening and a focus on education for dyslexic students and others with learning literacy learning difficulties. Where are we with that, and what are the numbers reflected in this budget as compared to last year's budget?
Again, with where we are with that, we actually have passed a board rule and policy on that, so we have that initiative, and we're initiating that throughout. We have a lot of guidance. That committee is ongoing, so we continue to meet with that. We are looking at screening. I think that has been the biggest challenge, to make sure that we have something appropriate that is available to each and every district, and it can be funded. Rusk, I don't know if you want to add anything else to that.
To my knowledge, there's nothing cut in the dyslexia program. Same funding rolled over. The 23, there was some additional funding for a pilot program, which is still undergoing. So that's funding.
But it continues to be a top priority for us, and especially as we look at rolling out new English language arts standards and our focus on reading. Hopefully that will be something that we can take that information and really enhance education in the reading and the literacy level for all kids.
Last, and then we have to cut it off, Whip Robertson.
Superintendent, I want to thank you for coming up, and I apologize, I was a couple of minutes late. During this past summer, I held a subcommittee hearing through the Senate Retirement Committee, myself and Chairman Larry Walker, and while I'm the first to agree that none of us would be here without a good teacher, I also believe that none of us would be here without dedicated school bus drivers, custodian workers, and food service workers. And I sat in a room and I listened to individuals talk about retiring after 25 and 30 years on the job with no Social Security and receiving $300 a month retirement. So I'm curious, is there a plan in place, or is there a group put together to address this issue? And or do you feel that we're being aggressive enough to address this? Because without these three jobs, teachers don't matter, and our educational system will fall apart.
Yes, sir. Well, again, I think that is an ongoing discussion, especially with the teacher retirement system. I think many of some of the many of the support individuals may actually be under the state retirement, if I'm not mistaken with that. And again, looking at what are possibilities or options, I think, trying to have discussions. Is it something that our support personnel can be brought underneath our teacher retirement system? That may be something that we look at just to expand. Is it something looking at the state retirement system, how we look at that? Many of our workers in that area definitely they used to get into this for insurance, and we're talking about insurance now and trying to fund, what does that look like? I know for us it is definitely, we got to have budgetary talks with you. I think the governor's office to try to address that. For our local districts, what does that mean? Are they having to, supplement? And what is, again, trying to figure out what does that cost as well? But I think that's, again, I wish I could give you more information, hands-on at this time, but it definitely is an issue that we continue to look at.
Thank you, Superintendent Woods, for your presentation today. As always, we still had some people that have questions, so that hopefully they can catch you offline, and
sure,
look forward to hearing more from you.
Yep. Thank you very much. And again, if we can be of service, please let us know at any time. Thank you.
As Chairman Tillery said, this is Education Morning. So next up is a man known by many titles, but now his title is Chancellor Sonny Perdue. If you could head on up.
Come on. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Chancellor Perdue, I hope you're not offended. I think one of the last times you may have come to make a presentation here, everybody stood up and clapped for you, so I hope you're not too offended today.
Excellent. Here you go, sir. All right. Highlighter. Excellent. Oh, looks like we have a cursor. That's okay. Okay. There we go. Okay, that's a green button working. Excellent.
Thank you for that, Chairman Hatchett. I can assure you I fully understand different roles today. Thank you and Chairman Tillery for welcoming me here today. Obviously, having sat where many of you all are today, I want to tell you how much I appreciate and respect the role of the constitutional role of appropriators. And you may not realize it because of all the other press that other bills get, but the two bills that you'll consider in your committee this year are the two most important bills for our state. They actually determine where your priorities are and really how the state moves forward. So based on our recent accomplishments, I would say you all have done extremely well. Georgia is thriving, and I think it's because the policies really appropriated, policies that are for which are appropriated the priorities of the state that make a huge difference. So your jobs are important. I fully respect that, and I want to tell you that we look forward to talking about how we can give you a return on investment for the monies that you entrust, the public monies that you entrust to us in the university system of Georgia. Obviously, you all are responsible for the expending, the cost. We're responsible for the return on investment. And this is what we see here. I think those of you who know me, look, we're always looking for continuous improvement. And our mantra that we've got with our university system presidents out here today, while we recognize and acknowledge it, we think we're a very good system in Georgia today. There's always room to be better. And just like the Georgia Bulldogs, we want to be the national champion of university systems in this country, acclaimed by everyone. So that's our goal, to go from good to better to best. Never let it rest till your good's better and your better's best. That's our striving, and that's what we want to use the money that you all appropriate to the university system to do. As I said, you all invest in higher education through your appropriation bills. Our responsibility is to be totally accountable, transparent, honest with you all in how we're using that money and what you're getting for that. I think the good news is when I stand here next year, assuming the Board of Regents allow me to stand here next year, then we hope to have a dashboard of metrics that you all can look at on a transparent basis. You, public, the citizens whose taxes are being expended, students, parents, and others, look at a comparative dashboard among our institutions and our system as a whole, so you can see how good we're doing and where we need to do better in that regard. So that's what we want to do. We've got some good records already. You know that we got some, two of our flagships are in the under best of 16 in the U.S. News and World Report. We've got other systems that are best value and good athletes, and in other places other than the University of Georgia as well, acknowledged in that regard. So we've got a lot of great things going on in the university system, and we want to make it even better. You see on the right-hand side over there, we got some little phrases here that we're talking about with our presidents. We want to be not your staid old university system of the past. We want to be nimble. We want to be responsive. We want to be fast. We want to be focused on our job. We want to be flexible in what it takes to make the workforce of tomorrow adequate for the expenditures of the economy in that regard. And we want to be friendly to you, to our citizens, to our customers, the parents and students out there, and to you, all the appropriators. And then by and large, we think education, higher education ought to be fun as well. So we're going to be fast, focused, friendly, flexible, and fun as we go forward. You know, when I was governor in 2003 to 2010, you all may remember, yesterday it was about incentives. Companies would come to Georgia, how much are you going to pay me? What is it going to take? What's your incentive package? Today, I think you all recognize, what is it about? It's about talent. And we're in the talent business, and that's what I blew the thing up. So that's what we're talking about. We want to be the workforce of tomorrow, because I'm firmly convinced, and have been since I chaired Senate Higher Education in 2003, that as higher education goes into Georgia, the Georgia goes a generation or two later. I'm fully convinced of that. We've got two great systems in our state, and I think the economic vitality you've seen over the last few years, particularly these last couple of years, is the direct responsibility of major corporations understanding that they can find great talent right here in Georgia to do what they need to do, both in the trades and both in the critical thinking skills of higher education in that regard. So that's where we are. I want to tell you about what's going on next. Many of you were not around, and I heard the question of Superintendent Woods. Many of you weren't around, like Representative Gerald Green in 1984 when the formula was done. But Gerald, thank you for putting that in 1984. But this is the formula, the appropriation formula we're still working on. For the FY24, how many years is that? That's 40 years. So you ask him what's changed in that way. We're going to talk about some of the things that's changed. But you all probably know the formula is based on a credit hour production, how many credit hours, both graduate and 4-year and 2-year, we're doing. You probably know it's based on a 2-year lag as well. Those are the 24 are operating on the 21 enrollment, and we're harvesting some of that decline that we saw during that period of time. Other things are M&O and square footage, health insurance cost. If you remember, I'll show you a chart. Originally, when the formula was put together, the intent was about a 75-25 state tuition split, about 75-25. It currently stands about 57-43. I'll show you a chart based on that of how we got there and when that way. You all determine a lump sum based on that formula, and anything else you want to take away or add to that formula, it's your prerogative each and every year. That's just an appropriation guide of what we feel it takes to educate that. We're going to show you some of the challenges that inflation has caused in that formula over the years. But then the Board of Regents, through its responsibility, allocates those funds to each individual institution in that way. So here's the state share of the funding formula. You can see back in 2001, we were up here around the 75. Since 1984 to 2001, that was about where the state share did. You see what's happened in the meantime, 75% in the 90s, in the mid well, there were actually twin recessions during that 2002 to 2012 time period. We started off in 2002. You can see the dip down here, and then kind of leveled out in the middle years. And then, I don't know who the governor was in here when that occurred, but you can see somebody didn't like higher education, obviously. But you all know what happened with the greatest recession we've had since World War II in that regard, and what happened to the formula. Since then, it's been relatively flat. And you see here, this little dip here was the fear of the pandemic and what it would cause. That was the $229 million there that was taken, and there in order to prevent the 10% across the board cut in that regard. Since that time, I want to thank you all last year for getting back up in here in the state share, primarily responsible with the $229 million of the special institutional fee. As you remember, when we were in this period in here, we had to allow the regents and the board of regents and our institutions to pick up with tuition gains. That created the balance that we see that occurs even to today. And what we're hoping to do is reverse that, because affordability is a big key. You know what student debt does to the future of students and our economy. So student debt is what we're trying to do to reduce and make our value as affordable as possible in this current environment here. So this is an important number. You need to understand, while this goes up, though, this $229 million you all appropriated last year, thankfully, thank you, went directly to students. In fact, it meant from about 350 to over 1,000 $1,000 a year for some students in their tuition reduction last year because of that special institution fee went away, thankfully to your appropriation. Here again, we're grateful for the $207 million for the $5,000 COLAs last year. Obviously, those went directly to employees, of which we're thankful. I'll show you the scale, the wage scale in a minute, but that went directly to employees, and we're grateful because obviously retention is very challenging in today's environment, and that goes a long way in helping us to retain and recruit people into our university system to go forward. So thank you for both of those. So I heard you ask the question, what's changed? You hear that your constituents ask you all the time, why is college so expensive? What's changed? When I was there, it was like $2.25 per quarter, you know, that kind of thing. You hear those sort of things. It's gotten more expensive than that, there's no doubt. What's changed? A lot of things have changed, and you all know that. It's insidious, but it adds up. Inflationary pressures over a lot of these. You may recognize the campus of the day is not the campus of your year in that regard, from a safety and security standpoint, both physical and cyber. The technological advances, Wi-Fi, the internet wasn't even there, you know, that way. And you've got those kind of challenges. You see the mental health issues on the campus. We have to provide for those kind of counseling and those kind of things. Obviously, many times our students are not as prepared as those students of 40 years ago, and student support is needed in mentoring, tutoring, and counseling. We got a more diverse student body now. Many of them are not coming as prepared as students of the past in that regard. Now, if you got any student in the higher education area, ask them if they have different student expectations than you. You remember telling them stories about the kind of dorm rooms you lived in and the communal showers down the hall, don't you? You think they want to live there now? No way. Those expectations from students are much different, whether it be dorms, dining, athletics, amenities, or social activities. Just like the football team, to recruit, you got to have the best looking field house, a covered practice field, and all that. Well, our academic students feel the same way. And they are now, it's a buyer's market out there. They're customers now. And we've got to recruit them as customers because there's a lot of competition among our neighboring states for our Georgia students. In fact, one of the things I'm concerned is we actually are experiencing an out-migration of Georgia students to outside the state. That's unconscionable to me. Why would a Georgia student want to go outside of Georgia with 26 great public institutions right here? And we're going to fix that. I'm telling you, we're going to do it. But there is significant competition in that regard. Obviously, just general inflation, you all know, going to the grocery store, you can't grow with the same day, put it in the same basket and get the same amount of food you got just even last year in that regard. So I'll show you a couple of specific things in that way. USG funding per FTE in $23 in FY $23. You can see back here in 2000 we were about $14.5 per student per FTE in that regard, and now we're about a little under 10 at $98.06 per FTE in that regard. Those are facts. It's not any condemnation. Those are just facts that you all need to consider as you look at funding our university system and what it will take going forward to sustain it in the future. We saw already these kind of decreases in the causes for those here in that way. That's not as I said, not a condemnation. This is just pure facts that you all can make determinations on as we go forward. Here's another one. People are the most important in any business, large or small. People, certainly in higher education, are the most important. Over 80% of our budgets in any institution involve people, whether it's faculty, staff, or anyone else that helps to operate the university system. I think this is pretty critical. 07, we had a 56,908. This is the formula earnings that we make, the formula, not what they're paid right now, but the formula earnings that you all get to base your formula on. And you didn't see much change, saw a little change up until 2010, and then from 2010, there was no change until the COLA last year of $5,000. So any of your salaries in any of your businesses or anything changed since 2007? I would think so. In fact, the last couple of years, we've seen extreme changes with wage pressure everywhere, both from lower end up to the upper end as well. So this is what the formula is based on that way. So just the facts that you need to know where the formula is coming from and what drives it in that regard. The formula salary factors there. So here's another one. Your utility bill, your grocery bill, all those things. Are you paying any more? Now, our institutions are paying more. Some of our utilities are up 20 to 30% over last year. Your M&O budget formula is based on this line here. There, based on some federal funding last year, it went up to about $7.86 per square foot in that regard. This is our expenditure line. That's the cost line there. And I think right in here is where we would settle. You're talking about a different $5 level, $5 difference between what it's costing us and what is formulaically appropriated in that regard. So that's a challenge. That's got to come somewhere. You got to pay the light bill. You got to pay all the other things here. But this is where you're appropriated in the formula that makes a difference. We mentioned to the governor and that $1 increase here, not talking about $5, but $1 increase in M&O rate would generate about $44 million for the university system. And we think those kind of edging up toward a reality of actual cost makes a sense in that regard as we go forward. So those are a couple areas, both salary and M&O operations, that contribute to the squeeze that we're seeing. You kind of see here on the general earnings and losses over the year, over a 5-year period from 20. What I want to call your attention to, in FY20, we had 17 universities that were gaining in there, and you see the decrease down. In FY24, only 6 institutions are going to be gaining in enrollment and dollar amount increases. These were the dollar amounts that were increased for those years, and then you can see the net down here. In FY20, overall system-wide, it was down 14 million, 18, 17, 23, and then here in this year, it's 71 million deficit there, which means that this is what we would be earning from here. Last year, we had this kind of growth in the system overall, which allowed us to mitigate between we were able to play Robin Hood to some degree between the gainers and the ones that had enrollment decline. We were able to mitigate that to some degree in that regard. This year, in 24, we don't have that ability, and that's going to hurt some of our smaller institutions in that way, is that we do not have the flexibility that we've had in the past in these areas where we could kind of mitigate from the growers to those that are declining in enrollment in that regard. And that's really going to hurt our smaller institutions and those that are declining in enrollment. Obviously, our system had built on continuous climbing, and now we see with enrollment decline, that brings more challenges here based on the formula because of the 2-year lag and because of the decline in student enrollment. This is where the rubber meets the road. This is what you members are going to face in your communities here. And as I said, FY24, we got 6 gainers, and we've got 20 that will show less money. You need to look at these numbers because you're going to see these and hear about these in the grocery store, the hardware store, and when you go to church at home about why didn't you fund our institution why are you cutting us? That's kind of the common thought of that way. So I want you to be prepared with the answer. These are earned funds that way, and I want to tell you, our institutions are doing a great job making do. They are making it work. As you probably know, I've had a little bit of experience in these kind of red numbers. In 2003 to 2011, I presented 5 budgets to the Appropriations Committee that had less money, literally less money than the year before. So we know about how to do more with less, and we're doing more with less. Our institutions are doing a great job realigning here, taking out any kind of excess that they can, finding that. But when you have over 80% of your budget at institutions being people, guess what? That means people, and that's going to affect you, and you're going to hear about it. So I want you to know what's driving this as you get home and hear from your people that understand the budgets of higher education. Let me just tell you what this means to me. We will commit to you that we're going to do our level best to do more with less and do more with less. It's not going to get any better for the next couple of years either. This is not just going to turn and pivot like maybe a state budget in 2011, 2012. It's not going to just be back up. This demographic cliff that we're facing is serious, and it's going to be with us. That's why it's important for these institutions to realign both personnel, both programs, and everything that is causing expenditure. We're looking at every line item at every institution to squeeze everything we can out of it to make sure we still maintain the value of the best academic system in the country in that regard. But this is the reality here, and I wanted you to be honest and transparent with you about what it is. It's not something we like, but it's something that I believe can make us better as we eventually come out of this, as we work with you all on looking at different formulaic factors and those kind of things. I think, again, you can do more with less for a long time until you do less with less. And that's the challenge that we have here in determining where that point is as we go forward. So, Mr. Chairman, that's the operational part of it. We've got the capital part I'll take a few minutes on and then be happy to answer any questions that you all and your members have regarding that.
Thank you, Chancellor. If you would, we could go ahead and take some questions now if you want to do that. Or you want to go ahead?
Yeah, if you could just be expeditious about the running through the 23 and 24, if you don't mind. We have a lit up board already.
I'm sorry?
We have a lot of questions already lit up, so if you don't mind, we're going to be a little expeditious about running through this. Thank you.
I need to talk to you about this. Our main ask this year is obviously the electronic medical record ask. The governor has supported. We anticipate it's going to cost $115 million. The University of Augusta and AUHS, Medical College of Georgia, is kicking in $10 million there. We're requesting $105 million. This is a modern. Part of medical education has to do with a classroom, anatomy, pharmacology, toxicology, all those kind of things. But the real practice of medicine has to deal with in a practice environment. And obviously we are looking, we do medical education extremely well. We don't operate hospitals very well. So we're looking for a partnership where our physicians in Georgia can experience a modern hospital environment that will help health all across the state. That's why we're seeking a partnership with WellStar that would enhance both the opportunity here that we have across the state for better health care, better education of our physicians operating in a modern environment with a modern electronic medical record system where they will be prepared to go out into the workplace. You know that you just don't see one doctor this day. If you go to the hospital, you see a hospitalist. We depend on these electronic medical records for better health care, better coordination, better communication, and in the hospital sense, a better revenue cycle. I know many of you addressed years past these surprise medical bills that you see 6 or 8 or 9 months after that people don't like to get. None of us do. This old antiquated medical record is part of that because by the time they get it all together, sometimes it's 6 to 9 months before they get the final billing out. This will help that in that regard, make a better health care, make better docs for our state in order to stay here and have an ability to practice in that way. So that's critical in that way, and I appreciate your attention to that as well. We appreciate, again, the $2,000 cost of living there. We see this is the enrollment growth that we talked about there, M&O growth of square footage is that way. You all know about health care with the state health benefit plan. Ours grows as well. We're pretty proud of that number, honestly, comparatively speaking. Let me just tell you about this, though. The COLAs. We got 15,500 people that are not affected under the state-funded part on those COLAs. Now, if you're an employer, it's hard to give one person $5,000 and another one next to them, don't give them a raise. So our institutions have determined that we're going to give everyone the $5,000 raise. Last year, the $5,000 COLA cost about $101 million. This year, the 2,000 will cost about $40 million as we go. Obviously, that's not your fault, but the people who are not covered, we think are valuable to the system. They're just not in that state-funded category, but we want to do right by them as well. You all need to know that number that also affects the challenges as we go forward here, going at. We appreciate the COLAs. We thank you for all of our people who are affected by that. We're going to give everybody that, but this is what the cost to the system is, and that has come out of institutional budgets as well. I think you all appreciate and respect the way the Board of Regents has done the capital projects with a unified way. We've got a great real estate team. We're not looking to grow our footprint. We're looking to grow the value of what we get out of what we have in that regard. So while you see some recommendations for new buildings, most of it's going to be renovation, and the small cap projects are more important as we renovate some of these ancient buildings to modern standards, technologically, safety-wise in that regard. So we have USG really looks at every institution, does quite a sophisticated matrix of recommending that. The Board of Regents approves this and presents it to you as we go forward in the capital plan. It's something we started years ago. I'm actually very proud of the way that the discipline of the Board of Regents has continued in helping to spread that all around the state, not have just the big dogs kind of push out the little dogs from the food trough in that regard. So that's what it does in that regard. Here you see our capital budget, a summary. You'll have a detailed packet of that, Mr. Chairman, and in that regard, you see here the construction of 4 governor's recommendation, small caps 13 and 22 in design in that regard. So those are our capital budget. Finally, hope you all know I appreciate what you do. I appreciate the awesome responsibility, the role. I respect that in the constitutional authority as appropriators, and I'm here to answer any questions. We're here as a system as a whole to answer any questions that you have honestly, transparently, and I look forward to engaging. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chancellor. To provide a little levity before we get into these questions, I can't help but recognize the symbolism in the year 1984 that you used this morning. 1984 happens to be the year I graduated from high school, and Dean Green, he had been here I don't know how many years, but it really hits home when you learn that the Appropriations Chairman in the Senate was born in 1984. So
I think that says it all, Mr. Chairman.
And he's in the role he is playing today. So congratulations, Chairman. So the first fiscal year, we'll take the first question. We will take from Chairman Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I ask unanimous consent to defend my sweet mate, Dean of the House, Gerald Green. I think Gerald was here perhaps before 1984 and did a lot of work to lay the groundwork for that funding formula. But on a serious note, thank you, Mr. Chancellor, for coming. My question is going to be a friendly one. You've gone through, and that's what happens in these 3 days, about what we need. We need a little more and that. But I want you, if you would, just take 30 seconds and tell us, maybe more than that, about what you've done in the last year to address the more efficient delivery in the university system as well. So we do have those needs going forward, but I mean, I know you have made some tough decisions along with your presidents to more efficiently deliver with the dollars that you get, and I think we'd just be remiss. I know you're not going to brag on the system and what you've done with your folks, but if you could just tell us what you've done about the degrees that weren't being delivered efficiently and how you're doing that, I think that's something this group should hear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, leadership has to do about vision and hope, and you have to do both. The reality, you can't ignore the reality of where we are with the formula, with declining enrollment. But I want to congratulate and thank our presidents for taking this very seriously. I do think my credibility from 2003 to 2011 of governing during those times while maintaining a AAA bond rating demonstrates it can be done. And I think that's the attitude that our presidents have done as we've asked them way back last May to start thinking about their realignment, how they would budget their institutions in relationship to the real reality, the modern reality of where their budget's going to be. They understand these things. They understand the impact of their enrollments that way. And I'm coming as their advocate on some of these issues, like M&O, salary formulas, and those, to let you all know that while we're going to make it work, and we're going to try to make it work and do more with less, at some point, literally, for some of our smaller institutions, with their percentage cut, it's very, very difficult.
Chancellor, I mean, even the resources you've shifted to more needed degrees from the degrees that weren't there, it has been very important to helping our workforce development, and I appreciate that.
No, as I said, I thank you for recognizing that. I think actually in times of need, we can get better. That's what I saw in those times when our civil servants in Georgia just blew me away with how functional they became, literally doing more than they ever thought they could. That's what we're asking our university system to do. Our faculties, by and large, understand that. They're operating in the reality, so I appreciate you recognizing that.
Chairman Beach.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chancellor, for all you're doing to have the workforce ready for these jobs. I've got two quick questions. On that $105 million that's going to Augusta, is Wellstar going to contribute in any way? Because aren't we doing a deal with Wellstar? Are they going to contribute any dollars to that $105 million?
They're contributing significant resources in the partnership otherwise. You probably recognize that our facilities in Augusta, if we had to support what needs to be done over there, I think we calculated about $875 million needs that way. This is just part of it. This will benefit. Obviously, we have an LOI with Wellstar. We expect that to close, but if it doesn't, this is needed at Augusta regardless to modernize the practice opportunity for our physicians in that regard.
My second question is, we spend a lot of money on search firms, and I don't have a problem with a search firm for a president's job, but we also hire search firms for lower level VP and provost jobs. Are we doing anything to encourage our presidents to have to do succession planning and have these people ready for these jobs and not have to spend money on search firms?
Great point, Senator. Absolutely. I'm a big believer in growing our own. We've got our Educational Leadership Institute going on right now, about 40 individuals that we're looking to identify these smart, ambitious, rapid learners there that we want to lead for growing forward in the system in that regard. We're also looking at our expenditure on search firms and figuring out how we can lower that as well. So we're very mindful. I was shocked when I saw how much money we were spending top to bottom on search firms, and that's a concern.
Thank you.
Representative Hughley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To Mr. Chancellor, good morning. And quickly, can you share with us the data that shows where the students are going, what institutions they're going to, their majors, and if you could share with us why they're going to other states, what majors are enticing them to other states?
Sure.
And also, the superintendent talked to us about the teacher shortage. Can you speak about our teacher prep programs and what we might need to do to make them more effective?
Sure. We're focusing both on teacher needs and nursing needs, which are in dire need in our state on both, trying to beef up those preparation programs in all of our institutions. Obviously, the forensics of why our students are out migrating is a puzzle to me, and we're doing a deep dive on that, interviewing actually focus groups and those types of plans to understand why students would desire to leave the state. If you recall back when the Hope Institute, the Hope Scholarship was first instituted, it had to reverse. It stopped the brain drain that way and created students coming here. With our flagships, obviously, we have the same challenge with a lot of out-of-state applications into Georgia Tech and the University of Georgia. Always a challenge with admissions that you all get a lot of calls about qualified students not being admitted. But we can get you the data specifically on different programs, what the enrollment is per degree. I would refer you also to the website that we put out about Georgia Degrees Pay in that regard. You can go institution by institution there. It's Georgia Degrees Pay, and it's a great website for students, for parents, about what it actually costs to go to an institution. It's the beginning step in that accountability phrase that I talked with dashboards about that. We'll have a much more robust display of dashboards next year that are available to you and your constituents, where you can not have to ask us those questions. You can go and see that, and then when you see something doesn't look right, then you can ask us the questions.
Chairman Hickman.
Yes, sir, thank you. Would you just clear up something for me? Because, well, thank you. You did a great presentation. Thank you so much for what you've done. With the WellStar thing, we in here, and in your presentation, you kept talking about partnership. I know what a partnership is, but the word on the street is that we're giving that hospital the whole thing to WellStar. Is it a true partnership, or what's clarity on it?
It's absolutely a partnership. What medical education is all about, Mr. Chairman, is really two components. You've got MCG doing a world-class job educating our physicians, but part of that physician training has to do clinical practice, and that involves having patients and a modern medical environment in which to practice in that regard. That's the part that WellStar does. It's going to be WellStar MCG Health in that regard, a true partnership where MCG does the front end of physician education, hopefully. Also, the partnership is needed because physicians are likely to stay where they have residencies. And if we have more residencies in the state, which WellStar is committed to provide all across the state, we think we'll be able to retain more of our physicians across the state, both rural, suburban, and urban areas here. So it's absolutely a true partnership. As you and I both know, you can't really control the word on the street.
Chairman Hupstetler.
Thank you for being here today and giving us this information. I assume the system they're going to is Epic, is that?
Yes, correct? Yes, from Cerner to Epic, correct.
Which is a really good system. Will you be giving us, I guess maybe in the committee process, some details of where all that will cover and sort of a...
We'll give you more than you want to know.
Okay. Thanks.
Sure, but it is. It's the most modern system, and as I said, the previous one, physicians couldn't communicate. They were actually literally transferring paper. And these day and time, you don't go see one doctor. You see multiple doctors. If you go to the hospital, you see a hospitalist. And if you don't have that chart there, they don't know who you are or what's going on with you. So this is critical to patient care, which will help us serve patients better, train doctors better.
Representative Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Governor, Secretary, or Mr. Chancellor, my question simply is, we do an extraordinary job of admitting students into higher education in this state. What we don't do as good a job, and it has a budgetary impact, is retain students. As a matter of fact, there's some other states that their formula for funding higher education not only includes how many are admitted, how many students are on the roll, but how many of them are making satisfactory progress towards a degree, how many they retain. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. That's a very accountable metric, and obviously the credit hours that are earned every year depends on not only new enrollments, but retained enrollments. These presidents understand that, and we're laser focused on retention for student success, because if students don't complete their degree, then they're out here in the Netherlands, maybe their financial aid is blown up, and they don't have any choice to get back in that regard. So we're focused on, I think Georgia State's a great example from student success of continuing through that. So that's a laser focus on it. Regarding the formula, on performance-based formula, that's another topic. If you want to talk about that sometime, we'd be happy to talk about that as well.
Chancellor, I'm going to kind of wrap it up here. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for answering the questions. I do have one point I'd like to ask your team to get us. It's not fair for me to ask it for it today, but yesterday we heard a lot of information about the Georgia Strong and the Georgia Aid program through DCH, and if you guys can get us some information about how that affects the state-owned and state-operated hospitals, that would be, we want to make sure that any move we make doesn't accidentally cause any ripple effects throughout our DISH programs and others, so that would be helpful information. And there was a slide I want to, if you can go back a few slides, it was interesting to me. It was the one on, one more back maybe, two more back maybe, right there. It actually, this caught me that it, just using these numbers, the difference in what it costs and the difference in what we're paying on M&O is that every time we build an extra 100,000 square feet, it actually costs the system about $733,000. And that was an interesting fact and figure to me. So.
It does cost more, $7.31 per square foot, if that's if your math is correct.
Yeah, doing the difference between those. So thank you for being here.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And we'll get that information to you. Thank you all very much. Appreciate what you do.
Thank you.
Just thanks for all your help. Appreciate it. Oh no, that's okay. Small potatoes. Was it this one or the one underneath it? Yes. Okay. I'm slowing you down. I apologize. Yeah, I saw it out there. Just there's your charger back. Appreciate it. Thank you. I was worried for you. I saw it spinning. And I was like, yeah.
All right, y'all, we're a little behind. We need to move on with our next presentation. If I could have your attention, please. All right, thank you. Next up is our Commissioner of the Technical College System of Georgia, Commissioner Greg Dozier. Glad to have you this morning.
Good morning, sir, and thank you guys for the opportunity to present. Today, I think I have a good story for us, and there's some indicators. As I watched yesterday and our economist gave you guys a presentation, we talked about the indicators of the economy and where it's headed, and I believe today's presentation on our technical college system will give you some indicators on where we are, and it's, in my opinion, a very positive. We've had 2 years, as the Chancellor just mentioned, 2 years of where we've been recovering from the pandemic and recovering from potential, or not potential, but recovering from enrollment decline. We still are going to see in today's presentation a decline for last year, but I have some positive news about the fall enrollment. So I'll talk today a lot about
Excuse me, Commissioner. Representative Mitchell, your flashlight is on and it's about to blind me back there. Somebody's is. Thank you. Sorry about that. Sorry about that, Commissioner. Y'all can start. Y'all get the door shut, please. Emory. Thank you. Sorry about that, Commissioner.
Thank you, sir. Today's presentation, though, and we'll hit into it, will really focus on high-demand career pathways. I will weave into the update on where we are today with several initiatives that you guys and the governor funded and supported this past session, and then we'll end on the budget for this year. So as we look at that, we're very, very focused on what our purpose is, and that is workforce development. The Chancellor used a term that we're extremely proud in TCSG, that we operate very nimble, we operate very localized, but we look at it from a global aspect as far as workforce development and how we impact, as you see, our mission to be a well-educated, globally competitive workforce. But we look very closely when you look at that vision and you see that we're looking to enhance the economic well-being of each citizen of this state. And we believe that focus closes the skills gap, but more importantly, it changes individuals, families, communities, and the state. As we look at who are our students, I've gone over this the last few years. I won't hit each one of them, but I want to tell you that we continue to trend in that first bullet. Last year when I presented, we were at an average age of 26 years of age. The year before that, it was 27. This year, it's 25. As you know, we have a huge dual enrollment population included in our numbers. I was wondering, is the dual enrollment really having that singular effect to push it down? But I'm proud to report, when you look at our traditional student, that number equally has been declining in age. This past year, it was 27 years of age. And what I believe that tells us is we're actually closing that gap for people finding their purpose in life through work. So I'm very, very excited about that. The third bullet down in there tells you another story about the importance of TCSG in the community and how we change lives. And that is 44% of our students are first-generation college students. There's a positive number in that. Last year when I presented to you, it's 51%. And that number had been pretty consistent over the years. And I believe that's showing that we truly are moving toward a more balanced, well-educated Georgia. We're having parents and siblings graduating together. I was at a graduation this past month down in Wiregrass, and we had a mother and a daughter graduating together in that class. It was just so rewarding. When we look at the lighter color at the bottom of the chart here, that's really our return on the investment. Something we're extremely proud of. We have a 75.2% graduation rate. We have a 99% placement rate. And we have an 89.4% in-field placement rate. I think that's so important. So often people come in and don't know where they're going, but I believe our colleges, our 22 presidents, are doing an extremely good job of helping map someone's desires to what they're getting educated in, and they're working in those fields. One thing that I really ask you to do is get engaged in your local college. Each year we recognize the Student of the Year, both in our tech ed side and our adult learner side, and we also recognize our Instructor of the Year on both sides. What you see in this chart is Ryan Degner. Ryan was a veteran. He came out of the armed services. He did a tour or so, came home, wasn't sure what his pathway was, but his wife knew how much he enjoyed learning welding while he was in the service. I love the story. He didn't quite tell it this way, but I'm going to tell it like his wife told it to me. He says he remembered how the first time he bursted an arc while he was in the military, and that's what drove him to TCSG. When I spoke to his wife, she said, actually, he kept coming home from work complaining he didn't know what his purpose was anymore. And I remembered how much he enjoyed and found in welding while serving, and I enrolled him in Wiregrass Technical College. Ryan, as you see in there, Stuart Countess is in the picture with him, with Kia. Always very proud of our partnerships. The incredible thing is Ryan walked away being named the Gold Student of the Year, and as most of you know, some of you may not, Kia donated a brand new K5 to him, and they've done that year over year. Just a phenomenal partnership. Rochelle White on the other end, she was our Adult Learner of the Year. Rochelle White's out of Oconee Fall Lines. What a warming story. For 16 years she was a CNA, serving the population down in Sandersville area. She went back to college. Came to college to get her high school equivalency and did it. And now she's on the pathway to be an LPN and then an RN. But that's one of those family stories. Her kids saw her going back to school, and it really changed the life of her whole family. And then we couldn't do it without the great educators. Jeffrey White out of Gwinnett, just a phenomenal ambassador for us, and Devlin Taylor as well. I'll speed up a little bit after this chart, but I do want to share, this is your first indicator. Last year when I came to you, that top number served, where you see 335,000 individuals, was 294. That was a little bit, I guess disappointing is the word I want to say. I'm not sure exactly. Heartbreaking, because we saw our number hit below 300,000. And as I looked at that, we kept going, well, when's the rebound going to come past COVID? When are we going to see enrollment go up? And this chart tells us a pretty neat story. I'll talk about a formula change in a minute, because we decreased in the largest area up there. When you see 131,000 in the technical ed side, that was down from 133,000 last year when I presented to you. That represents about a 1.5% decline in headcount. When we get to the formula in a minute, that's a 3.5% decline in credit hours. So the number of people weren't quite as decreased as the number of credit hours took. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But the positive story in here is when I look at the other areas. Quick Start increased 64% in who we served. I'll talk about Quick Start in a minute. Adult Education increased 25% on those we were serving seeking a high school equivalency. Workforce Development was fairly flat. Economic Development, though, was up 17.5%. And I want to talk about economic development a little more. What that really means is that's customized training that we're doing in the community for our industry partners. Right now on this current pathway, next year I'm going to be standing before you, and that's going to be a huge number, because we're up 300% right now over these numbers that you're seeing. If that trend continues, I'm going to have a great story in that area of customized training. What that tells me is the need of workforce. I don't know if y'all heard it. There's a bunch of folks that need folks working, right? Our employers have really partnered immensely with the technical college system, and they're investing in our populations across the state and doing it on the non-credit side and the credit side, but we're seeing it in that quick approach to get skills and get them into the workforce, and that's where this area is really robustly growing. When you look at it this year over last year, the numbers are up 13.6% globally for the system. Like I said, in a minute, we'll spend most of our time on that light blue area, the largest area, because most of the state budget is the funding in that area. So that's where we'll spend some time talking about our formula shortly. What I will tell you is our fall enrollment, the next few slides will focus on high demand career areas. We're slightly up. We're up 2% for our fall enrollment over fall last year. So when you combine our economic development, our customized training with what fall enrollment looks like, I honestly believe next year we're going to have a very positive story standing before you on our numbers. Go ahead and tell you before I get there, I said it was 2% up on the technical ed side, the light blue. If you dive into it deeper, the high demand career paths, the career paths that we all want to see because they're good wage earners, there's so many jobs out there, our employers need it, is up 6% in enrollment fall over fall. And so very, very positive story there. As we look at some accomplishments, I won't hit all these, so we'll go fairly quickly. This is for you to take away. In our adult education, just a reminder that that third bullet down, we had 931 students earn 1,391 industry-recognized credentials through IET. What IET is, an integrated education training platform. That means that our adult learners are not just getting a high school equivalency, but they're walking away knowing how to weld. I might be like the chancellor. I might have broke it. There we go. So what we found through studies was a high school equivalency alone was not changing the outcome of our adult learners. They were getting it and continued to do the same job they were doing. But with an IET, a skill, we were seeing a change in that lifestyle. Also, thanks to you guys this year, the HOPE HSE, the High School Equivalency Grant, covers all the exam costs. So we believe that's going to help us on the HiSET testing, the GED testing, and obviously as we move through Career Plus, there's not testing there, but it helps them as well as far as navigating. Economic development, I've already mentioned that. 26% growth in our training hours from 21, right now 300% in this current fall cohort. Quick Start. One thing I want to say is Quick Start has jumped. You guys have heard all the announcements. Our Quick Start training team is just, they're working their tails off. But the fourth bullet down I thought was really, really interesting. 60% of the projects we're working with Quick Start are outside the metro Atlanta area, and it represents 85% of all of those we're training. The projects that are coming to this state are going statewide, and we're seeing that in who we partner with. The last bullet just gives you some names that you've already seen: Rivian, Hyundai, Archer, SK Battery, and so many more. As we look at workforce, apprenticeships, apprenticeships, apprenticeships. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Last year, this assembly gave us $1.275 million, and we'll talk about it in a minute. I have a chart on it, to actually state fund some apprenticeships. That went along with a small grant that we got from the federal government, and then the governor gave us a $4.2 million grant. We have a great story in this state on apprenticeships, and that's going to make a difference. Technical education, we launched, thank you, for $4.7 million last year for the Dual Achieve program. Just to remind you what that is the opportunity for TCSG to implement 5 pilot high schools. Those 5 pilot high schools have been opened. They're at Central, Atlanta, Chat Tech, Athens, and Albany. We have already seen success. Central Tech has already graduated 2 individuals with their high school diploma. You see in the picture down here on the far left, Armani Robertson. Armani was our first graduate. Armani was struggling with where to live. He was trying to figure out how to survive. He was not looking to finish high school. This opportunity not only gave him the chance to graduate this year, but it landed him a job. Dr. Ivan Allen down at Central Tech now has Armani working on Central Tech's campus. That is a great success and something you're going to continue to see. Just a reminder, we hope to serve over 200 individuals through this at each campus. The next chart tells you our success on the technical ed side. This past year we had 34,037 graduates. Those 34,000 individuals accumulated 59,512 awards. They also accumulated in those awards 44,000 technical certificates. We had 7,000 diplomas. And once again, we set an all-time high of 8,233 two-year associate diplomas. Very, very proud of that. And I'm going to talk about articulation in a minute. Articulation is key to that. As we look, I wanted to let you know what our top 10 programs are. These are groupings. So as you look at it, for example, that first one, healthcare and related, CNA is going to be the large factor in that, but it also includes LPN, RN, dental, phlebotomy, all the different things that you hear in healthcare. Jumping down to another area that you hear a lot about, manufacturing and industrial systems. Welding is in that one, along with all the manufacturing and PLC and things of that nature. 6, transportation and logistics, CDL and aviation. And number 9, I'm going to spend a little time in a minute talking about our law enforcement academy. But those are our top 10 areas that we serve our students. I mentioned high demand career areas. Last year, if you recall, we were down 10.3% in our enrollment. If my memory was 10.3 or 10.5, all of a sudden I'm going blank. That enrollment decline, we were very blessed. The governor reduced the budget by $23 million, but we had an add of a little over $30 million to help make sure that we continue to provide services in these areas, the high demand career areas. You heard the Chancellor talk about that a few minutes ago. I'm extremely proud of what our presidents did. We started this past summer with a goal of how do we increase enrollment. And me and my team traveled the state and met with the presidents and their teams, and each college had a robust enrollment growth plan that covered all aspects of the college, not just one, but it had a singular focus to make sure we looked at high demand and how do we impact that. I believe the funding, the focus, and the effort, the true effort by our presidents and our folks at the local level It's what we're attributing a 2% growth this fall over last fall, but more importantly, a 6% growth in high demand when you look at it. Looking at a few of those areas that are so important, nursing fall over fall has a 10% growth. You're going to hear and continue to hear about great partnerships. You mentioned Wellstar earlier. We have an incredible partnership with Wellstar, but we also have some incredible ones with Piedmont. We just down in the Augusta area cut a ribbon where Piedmont Hospital has donated a location next to their closed hospital that's going to allow us to train our future nurses, healthcare providers. They can walk across the street and get their clinicals. That's amazing. It's going to increase our capacity up to 200 at that single location. That's amazing in that partnership. You have one right below that. We're going to be doing a ribbon cutting on it, I believe, next week or the following week with Phoebe down in Albany. They're building a new facility right across from their hospital and partnered with Albany Tech. Very similar. We're going to have a robust area there. As you look at CDL, we know supply chain issues have been huge. We could not have done it this past year. Coca-Cola provided a $1 million grant. The governor provided a GEARS funding of $8 million for us to enhance capacity. And the early return on those investments, and they're not fully seeing the return yet. We'll see that as the year continues. 24% growth in enrollment. 24% growth. Aviation, thank you to this body. Thank you, Chairman Knight, for having a focus on that. You guys provided last year's budget $2.1 million to allow us to expand cohorts and $2.5 million for equipment. We didn't know the FAA was going to change some of the requirements. It was so timely. Thank you, because that timeliness gave us the chance to get all of our programs up to date on the FAA, reopened the Atlanta program. We have the one in Dallas opening in 23. Early fruits of that, 7% growth in enrollment. And that's going to climb rapidly as we're just now getting into that expansion. Manufacturing, 3% growth. In that, 5% growth in welding. Cyber, 9% growth. So many things in that area that we talked about. One of the big ones is the coding expansion, and I'll mention a little bit in a minute about micro-credentials. We really believe micro-credentials is a collision of that non-credit area with the credit area, speeding up the ability to get folks to work with a credential that's validating. But cyber is growing. And our LEA, our law enforcement academies, couldn't be more proud. We made some changes to those academies. Honestly, we were at the point where we were trying to make a decision, is that a business we should be in? Because we were not doing our part to make sure we had law enforcement officers graduating. We had a 33% growth in that, 121 graduates across our system, and we have just implemented what I think is going to help this state, a state-of-the-art simulator shoot house down at Georgia Piedmont that was funded through a federal grant, and it's impressive. That's going to make a difference for our law enforcement providers across this state. As I mentioned last year, we were provided state funds of $1.275 million. You see that in that first column under registered apprenticeships. That money has allowed us to serve over 31 employers, 106 new apprenticeships. The recovery grant that we were given, the one-time monies through the AER grant there, $4.2 million, over 900 new apprenticeships. And then our state ASE grant, 685 apprenticeships. We are dedicated and making a difference in that area. This is just a small, I almost took it out, but then I also thought this is a powerful slide. I could have put so many logos on here you couldn't have even seen them. So many. So I was really nervous. I'm going to have some industry partners go, why didn't mine get up there? I'm going to blame it on the staff. Don't we do that all the time? No, I'm just kidding. There's some real neat stories on here, and I'm not going to point them all out, but I want to point out one just because it probably, you're thinking one thing, and I want to tell you how these companies are helping a global look at technical education across the state. Delta, y'all went straight to aviation, didn't you? I did when I saw it. And they're doing an immense job helping us, especially at Atlanta Tech and at the new facility for Chat Tech and Paulding and everywhere else. But Delta's partnered with us to actually help the non-aviation folks in Delta. West Georgia Tech is training all the folks that do anything that has nothing to do with the airplane. I'm trying to think, conveyor belts that you see that move luggage and everything else. They had a training deficit in that area, and they came to West Georgia Tech and partnered. That is huge. And I couldn't be more proud that our companies across this state, large and small, look to technical college to actually bring solutions, and that says a lot about our 22 colleges and our presidents. We're at the budget. So we have a supplemental budget here. You see the middle column. The total budget recommendation by the governor's office is $129,375,000. It incorporates 3 items. All 3 of them are connected to, I believe, what the governor mentioned in his inauguration, being the electric mobility capital of the country. The first item is design funding. It'll be one-time money. It'll come out, all of this will be one-time money. It will not be in next year's budget. But it's $6.25 million to design a facility. If you recall, last year this body appropriated $6.25 million for another electric mobility training facility. The second item is the large one. It's $112,500,000 to build the construction cost for 2 quick start EV training facilities. That's $56.2 million each. And the last item is an expansion of the Quick Start Training Center in Pooler for $10.6 million. Those items are obviously a design money and training facility for the Rivian project, the design money, the construction for a facility for the Hyundai project, and then an expansion at the Pooler facility of the $10 million for the suppliers that are coming to that area to provide training. That is that one-time money that's in the supplemental. The 2024 budget, you'll see I have it broken into 3 columns, and I'll speak about each column. The first column is the statewide changes at $13.2 million. That includes the first 2 bullets that you see below the spreadsheet. The first item is the $2,000 cost of living, $11.5 million. Of that is the cost of living. Just as the Chancellor mentioned, that's an area that you guys always hear about. That's something that, as we look at it at a localized level, we have about half of our positions are state funded, and about half of them are funded through fees, grants, other funds. So when you look at it, it's about a 50-50 as far as what our college and your presidents really manage. So when you're out there talking to your colleges, I always say that our colleges operate as close to a private business as I've seen. As you know, I've had the blessing to lead a couple of agencies now. But when you look at our state budget, the $400 million of state dollars, we really operate nearly a $1.3 billion operation. And when you look at that, there's a multitude of funding streams, whether it's fees, whether it's tuition, whether it's grants, whether it's Perkins monies that come down, whether it's the customized training, we're actually providing a service at cost. When you look at that, our presidents really manage all that, but they have to make tough decisions because this is a huge blessing, but they will be managing that, and as the Chancellor said, you will hear a little about it. But that's what we do each and every year, and we are blessed to have this. The second item in that statewide change is DOAS insurance premiums, Teamworks billing, merit system assessment at $1.6 million. The second column is the formula changes. That formula change is a result of a decline in credit hour enrollment of $8.9 million. Chancellor gave you guys a great overview of the formula. I won't rehash it. We did not get a formula till 2001, so some of y'all might have been around then versus the dean there. But when you look at it, there are slight differences. Ours is a little less complicated, which still means it needs to be looked at as we move down the road. We have 5 buckets. Those 5 buckets basically were created back in 2001 based on 2 years prior enrollment. Those buckets obviously have changed in the type of training we do. It's changed in the complexity of the training. You know, obviously cyber is totally different now than what it used to be. As we look at those buckets, those are something that you'll hear about as you talk. But also, we do not have a fixed formula, meaning our formula every year, what's appropriated, then we divide it across what was appropriated, and the formula kind of has a new starting point. And so if the budget goes down, the formula goes down. If the budget goes up, it goes back up. And so that's a little bit different in ours and USG's. My understanding is theirs is more of a fixed figure in their formula buckets. And so as we talk, they'll be similar, but there is slight differences as you guys ask questions. And I don't bring that up as a negative. I just bring it up as there's just slight differences. So as you talk to the chancellor and he shares things with the formula, please ask me because there's variations. Those percentages are very close. Back when that formula started, it was about 75% state funded for a student. We're just under 40% now. I think USG was just over 40%. So very, very similar. There's some justifications for that. Some of it is we didn't have as much federal dollars as we do now. Some of it is the funding formula's gone down as well. As you look at the other system changes, a lot of these are one-time items. I mentioned it last year. You funded the design money for one of the Quick Start training facilities. We're removing that one-time money of $6.25 million. The next item is a one-time reduction related to repairs and maintenance fundings for Southeast Georgia Tech at $500,000. The next item is related to the customized recruitment related to employing the new staff at the two electric facilities, Hyundai and Rivian. Last year you appropriated, I believe it was right at $600,000. This is $897,000 that goes along with that recruitment and promise to those two companies as they come in to recruit and bring aboard their staff. The last item is a transfer. This is not new monies. This is a transfer of $250,000. It was in DCA's budget. We've always gotten a grant year after year to serve our veterans. Those monies then go out to, I believe, 5 of our colleges. I don't have those with me, but off the top of my head, I know Savannah, Augusta, those that actually have Central, those that have a lot of our bases get this money out to actually provide training for veterans that are reentering. Mr. Chairman, we have one more page. Sorry, I was about to forget the capital. Very quickly, we have 3 items in the capital that come out to $35.4 million, $8 million for our equipment refresh, $7.5 million for the final equipment, furniture, fixtures, and equipment for the nursing facility at Central that was a renovation last year, the Purcell Hall at North Georgia Tech that was a renovation last year, the diesel and auto collision facility, that's a new facility in Albany, and a new large campus that was funded at Southern Regional Tech, that's an industrial campus. The last item is one we're really excited about. Thank you to Senator Hickman and several others in here that very much supported it. And that's a new facility that's a true partnership at Ogeechee Tech, $19.9 million. It'll be a 37,307 square foot facility. It'll allow us to triple the capacity of our training from 140,000 training hours to 460,000 training hours, and really will play a huge factor as we see the suppliers and others coming into that area. Mr. Chairman, that is our budget. I hope I have questions, and I hope I've done my 22 presidents and my system office justice in sharing our story.
Thank you, Commissioner Dozier. I think you've done a pretty good job. We only have 3 questions at this moment. Chairman Parsons.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner. Yeah, I've been seeing you here in these meetings and subcommittee meetings and your different roles for a long time now, it seems like.
Thank you.
Thank you. Y'all do a great job. I'm always impressed. I did want to ask you about something you had mentioned back about I think about halfway during your presentation. It just caught my ear. You had mentioned a grant that the governor had given the program. And I'm just wondering, did that come from a discretionary fund, or where did that, and I don't remember the amount.
Yes.
I'm always curious about things like that. Where did that money come from? Do you know?
Yes, sir. I mentioned 2. They essentially came from the same or similar grant fundings. We received one for CDL that was just over $8 million. We also received another one for $4.2 million for apprenticeships. Both of those grants were some of the ARPA money or the CARES money that came down from the federal government, and we're extremely blessed to receive it. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Knight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Commissioner, thank you for all you do in the technical colleges around the state. It is so vital to our state, and especially as we focus on these workforce development needs. I know the technical colleges play such a role. And as we see that expansion of really trying to focus on that, through some of the visits I've made, not only to my own technical college, but others, we go back into the areas that workforce development needs. You mentioned welding, plumbing, electrical. I hear from so many around the state that we're having issues there, and we need obviously more. That's certainly a foundation of workforce as the state grows. But specifically, as we start to look at these campuses, and again, our mission and your mission statement, state of the art, how do we go about evaluating this, or have you evaluated where we are on these campuses? Are we dealing with technology and or maybe older systems versus what the industry has moved to? That may be something we want to focus on and have an evaluation to see where we can help in the future, to see if we're working with facilities that are 20 years old, 30 years old. How are we keeping up?
Right.
Or are those things so important? I believe they're so important to help make sure we attract our new workforce and make sure that they're being educated on the newest technologies, equipment.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that statement, and I truly appreciate it, because it's a huge factor. When you look at our facilities, we have been very blessed in my tenure being here in the last 3 years, and I believe prior to my being here, the support by the governor and support by this body to really move our facilities into state of the art. I truly believe that we are a first choice. What I mean by that is for so long, many saw TCSG as the option for those that couldn't get into certain colleges. I believe that as we continue to move forward, being a state that brings in businesses, and I think we're seeing this through the partnership with the superintendent and the partnership with the chancellor, we're seeing that we're really focused on career pathways and what is a student and a community needing in that area. In saying that, we need to make sure, if we're going to be a first choice, our facilities and our training match what you just said, Mr. Chairman. We've done a great job. You'll walk into our colleges and you'll see state of the art. You'll walk into, I can give you areas, Gwinnett Tech, you're going to find a Mercedes automobile facility that's state of the art. You're going to go down to Ogeechee and you're going to see a robotics area that's state of the art. You're going to go into Central Georgia Tech, down in the Warner Robins area, and you're going to see a nursing facility and health, allied health areas, state of the art. We still have other areas that are not state of the art. And one of the things I'm very proud, like the Chancellor mentioned, is of our capital process. When we look at that, we look to see what is the industry needs, the community needs, and where are we not state of the art, and how can we improve that and move it to it. Having said that, the equipment refresh is vital. State of the art changes so rapidly. SREB said things changed by a 5-year pathway. I believe it's quicker. When you look at manufacturing, the companies that opened their doors last year versus the companies that are going to open their door next year, the robotics, the skill level that you're needing just in a short 2-3 year period is changing as quick as we can change the training. That is something we do make sure we have advisory boards, as you know, but for some may not, at every program at every college to make sure the training we're providing matches the training needs, but we do have to keep up on facilities. Thank you for that question.
Chairman Anabatarte.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, great to see you.
Yes, sir.
My favorite commissioner. But I want to go a little bit further than Chairman Knight's question. So, based on your slides, it appears enrollment continues to go up, but you have a budget reduction. And we're in the midst of workforce challenges. We need truck drivers, welders, cyber coders, everything under the bus that you can think, under the world you could think of to grow this economy. Can you explain to me why we would have a budget reduction in the midst of needing to grow the workforce? And, you know, and I'm not diminishing the priorities of EV or anything, but the port is growing. I know traffic in West Georgia with logistics and everything, we're continuing to see the growth. I think we're going to see the growth with the Aviation Academy, you know, being constructed right now in Dallas. Like, can you talk to me about what does the future hold for making sure you have the support to do what we need to do as a state?
Yeah, thank you for the question, and I appreciate the focus, and my 22 college presidents appreciate it as well. That's something that we really, we pride ourselves, but we also struggle with. The question you just asked is the formula drove that reduction. That's something that prior to my time back in that 99, 98 time frame, this system did not have a formula. And it was something that was debated greatly because USG had a formula, and how can it sustain and provide something that's more sustainable for the technical ed side. We got that back in 2001 when it was implemented. Essentially, it really hasn't changed any since 2001, similar to USG back to 86. When you look at it, our enrollment growth put out that $8 million reduction, and that's the only answer I can give you. Other than I can say that that struggle is real for our presidents. As they look, just as the Chancellor mentioned, inflation hits everything on operations. Changing in the technology, as Chairman Knight mentioned, changes the advancement of what we train on and how we train. The cost of providing those programs continue to go up. Just the one that we always talk about so much is, nursing. For example, we are very proud that we have a very affordable opportunity for our citizens across the state at $100 per credit hour. Our formula buckets, the highest formula bucket we have is about $190 per credit hour. So if you look at the highest bucket, and healthcare was not it, industrial maintenance is. Healthcare is around, if memory serves me right, I'm around 180. So if you take 180 plus 100, that's $280 a credit hour for a nursing program. We know that program costs, in real cost, somewhere around 400 plus per credit hour. We do, and I have to give my presidents and their folks immense credit on this, and our industry partners. We take the state money, we take the tuition money, and then we really weigh heavily on our private partners who come in and really provide scholarships, provide funding for teachers and instructors. We have so many healthcare partners that are funding instructors that offset that difference I just mentioned. So as you look at it, I couldn't be more proud of our 22 colleges, because when you look at the budget, we're so much bigger than what the state budget says. And that's not a negative or a positive, other than a positive on what our presidents and their team do each and every day at the local level. Thank you, though.
Thank you, Commissioner. Y'all, we are quite behind, but we're going to close out with one last question here, and there's others that want to ask, but we're going to have one last question. Leader Beverly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the presentation. One quick question, well, actually two questions. One is, what is the percentage of students that come to the technical college system on public transportation?
I don't have the exact answer, but I can tell you it's large. We do try to position our colleges near public transportation. As you look at Atlanta Tech, as you look at the new campus we opened up for Gwinnett Tech, it's right across from public transportation. I'll try to get that for you, but I don't know the answer, but it's a large amount.
Thank you. And the second question is there any thought around covering the opportunity cost for retooling the workforce? So meaning someone leaves the opportunity to come to technical college, is there an opportunity that you guys are thinking about, we can cover the opportunity cost to leave one position to go to another, but give students an opportunity to have a grant or some type of stipend as they go through college to get to this next opportunity?
Yeah, you probably know this, and I apologize if I'm restating what you already know. We are blessed to have two parts of HOPE in the technical college. We have a HOPE career grant. That's something we're extremely proud of. The governor and you guys actually last year expanded that, so it's 18 buckets that the HOPE career grant fall in. Last year you expanded it to criminal justice and law enforcement. So if that individual does not have a 4-year degree or has used HOPE in the past, there is a opportunity through the HOPE career grant to help that individual no matter what their age is. We also are very blessed. I mentioned the industry partnerships. That's exactly what most of the scholarships are doing that our industry provides. They grant a lot of money for scholarship in specialized area. For example, Coke on CDL, others in welding, others in the PLC, and we're trying to retool that population. And then one I did mention, just to add in, I think a lot of times when we talk about this, we forget about our adult learner. In our adult learner, we're trying to do all we can to make sure we're doing exactly what you say. We're not really retooling. We're adding a tool in their bucket, but they're going to need that retooling as well. So I believe there is opportunity in that area, and I appreciate the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Dozier. I think we all appreciate everything you and your people do for us and to make sure that we have a great workforce in our state. And I think you have definitely shined the light on the need to maybe look at that little funding formula.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
If I could pick on the dean, as you mentioned earlier, real quick as I walk out.
That's your prerogative.
I began in 1995 working for this great state. And one of my first opportunities as a young analyst in the Legislative Budget Office was to sit right here in this seat next to the dean, who was the secretary of the Appropriations Committee. It was a memorable day.
The dean didn't know he was going to get talked about so much today, did he? All right, next up is our DOT Commissioner, Russell McMurray.
Commissioner, come on up, and we're ready when you are. No, you don't feel like you have to rush. We're behind. Sorry. Members, if you would cease all audible conversation or take your other conversations to the back of the room, we're going to go ahead and get started again and ask the doorkeepers if they don't mind pulling the doors.
You got a presentation? Or? No. Okay. Mr. Chairman, let's get a presentation loaded up real quick.
Okay.
There was traffic congestion in the hallway. I don't know who to see about traffic congestion over here, but...
Commissioner, thanks for being here. I'd be remiss if I didn't notice Chairman Perkle. It looks like you're just keeping that seat warm for him.
Yes, sir. All right.
Commissioner, the floor is yours.
All righty, we'll get going while we get this presentation loaded up so you can have some visual images. But it's really a pleasure to be before you today, Chairman Tillery and Chairman Hatchett, I know, just stepped out and will be back in. I want to recognize Kevin Abel, our DOT board chair, is here with us today, as well as Ann Purcell from the 1st District and Jamie Boswell from the 10th Congressional District. So it's always great to have our board, State Transportation Board, to be here. And today my goal is to walk through 5 topic areas with you. One is just a little bit of a GDOT's overview of our mission. We'll talk a little bit about our staff, who is wonderful. We're talking about where funding comes from, and then we'll talk about where it's used, and then get into the budget itself and try to be very expeditious in our presentation today. Let me jump back. Oh, you okay? Thank you, Angela. So I will remind everybody, if you were at the biennial, you saw some of these slides, but I wanted to bring them back in front of you because I think it tells the good story of our mission, which is to deliver a transportation system focused on innovation, safety, and mobility. And we remind ourselves that Georgia is the biggest landmass east of the Mississippi River, and subsequently we're the 10th largest transportation system in the nation. So we are sort of a big deal. And when we think about that transportation system, it's driven a lot by population, being the 8th most populous state in the nation, and we're continuing to grow. I think you've had some conversations earlier or yesterday about population growth and where Georgia's headed, but we know by 2050 estimates are that Metro Atlanta may grow by about 3 million people, which is sort of like putting Nashville, Tennessee in the metro region, which is a huge impact. And so obviously that's important, and that's on our minds as we have to think about mobility of people and goods around not only Metro Atlanta but the entire state. Number 1 is on the screen. Number 1 state of which to do business. Very proud of that, 9th year in a row. That is critical. Transportation is critical to that number 1 ranking. They go hand in glove, and so that's very important of how we invest and work on our transportation network, that we remain number 1 state to do business. And the other thing is very small on that slide under number 1 is 3,741 committed GDOT employees, and they are truly number 1. It's always times like this with tornado damage that we're dealing with now, hurricane response, snow and ice, bridges that get hit or maybe fall down, get hit and fall down, or they burn. And the response to from our employees is just amazing. You'll never meet a more committed and dedicated group of individuals. And that was truly exemplified on Thursday evening into Friday night as the tornadoes came through Georgia and storm cleanup began immediately. And in fact, we have not stopped. We've worked continuously since then, have hauled over 1,157 dump truck loads of debris away, not only from state routes, but with the state of emergency, working on county roads and city streets, trying to help our fellow Georgians in their time of need. But that level of dedication, again, was exemplified when on Friday morning around midnight, our Walker County foreman, Sean Kornacki, received a call out for State Route 193, and the call out was tree on power lines blocking the roads. Just like all our foremen do, who are on call 24/7, he answered the call, got up, got dressed, and responded to the scene and tried to get that road clear. Unfortunately, we buried Sean on Monday. The tree fell on him, and that's a tragic reminder of the dangers that our foremen and our employees deal with on a daily basis. But it also exemplifies, in my opinion, why the commitment of the DOT employees are truly number 1. But I would be remiss not to mention GEMA, the Department of Public Safety, Department of Natural Resources, and the Georgia Forestry Commission, who all work on these kind of events. So that's why, and I appreciate both chambers recognizing Sean's commitment last week on Friday morning. Thank you for that. I'll come back to employees in a minute, but let's talk about this 10th largest transportation network in the nation. Over 125,000 miles of road, over 15,000 bridges. GDOT's responsible for 18,000 miles of roads, which is only about 42% of the transportation network of roads. But 62% of the traffic is on those 42% of roads. Other facts are interesting that Georgia has 15 interstates that connect to 30% of the continental United States. So our interstate system has a big reach across the continental United States. And that's very important because to move that freight and that traffic. In 2019, over 500 million tons, say it again, over 500 million tons, which represents $700 billion of goods, were moved in Georgia. 80% of that freight tonnage, 80% of the 500 million tons either came into Georgia or in Georgia and moved around Georgia. There was only about 20% of 500 million tons that actually sort of moved through Georgia. So we're manufacturing and exporting, or we're bringing imports in and consuming those in the state. Not as much through freight movement as you probably would think. And of course, agribusiness, manufacturing, and e-commerce are all big drivers on those interstates and across Georgia's roadway network. So the other factoid I give you is if you draw a box around the state of Georgia there and count up how many miles we all drive in one day, 330 million miles driven in the state in one day. That's a staggering number. So multiply that time 365, and I don't know what that math is. That's a lot of decimals, so or a lot of commas rather. So the other thing I highlight too is our bridges. The most expensive asset that cities, counties, and the state have are our bridges. We have 1,392 that are load restricted due to their condition, or they're just simply not designed to hold the heavy trucks that exist today. And we continue to work on trying to address those bridges. At the bottom of the slide, though, we have a lot of multimodal strengths, too. 105 airports, of course, the planet's busiest airport, Hartsfield-Jackson International. But air cargo is becoming more and more of an impact to Georgia. In fact, $3 billion of domestic commodities moved in the state, just within the state, and $27 billion of commodities moved internationally through Georgia. So our airports have a big impact. 92 transit operators across the state. The southeast most rail with 4,600 miles of rail, both Class 1 and short lines. And of course, our friends at the Georgia Ports Authority with two ocean ports, if you will, Savannah and Brunswick, and 2 inland ports, one in operation and one soon to come online. So we have a lot of great assets from the transportation network. Now let me turn to how do we implement this and the people that drive our transportation network and are responsible for the mobility. And take just a minute. This may be a reoccurring theme. We all are struggling with recruitment and retention in the state and in the private sector. We actually got down to 3,600 employees and are, as I said a minute ago, about 3,700 now, trying to build back toward 4,000. We need to build back to 4,000 so that we can handle the tornadoes response, hurricane, snow, and ice. When it snows in Metro Atlanta, we bring people from South Georgia up here, and the Tifton office actually is responsible for the Metro Atlanta interstates. So it's all hands to shift up and to try to cover this. But when we have the bad things that happen in our state, we need to be able to be responsive. Plus, we need to grow our institutional knowledge, which is a huge drain. If you look at the bar chart on the right, I just highlight that today 60% of our workforce has 10 years or less than experience, as compared back to the left of that bar chart. In 2009, we had 18% of our employees 10 years or less, plus we had 1,300 more employees back in 2009. So you can see the brain drain that's happening in the department. I want to thank both chambers for your recognition of our workforce in last year's budget for recruitment and retention. Very important, so that we can, as again, we got down to 3,600. We're trying to work our way back, and we're making a little progress very slowly. And certainly, want to thank Governor Kemp for his recognition of the $2,000 pay increase for state employees in the FY24 budget. Now, let me turn to where the transportation funding comes from. And this slide has a breakdown by sources of revenue. We'll start on the state side at $2.3 billion, and this is the FY23 base. Okay, so we're using FY23 base for these numbers. Over $2 billion actually comes from motor fuel tax, which is now 31.2 cents a gallon, and diesel's 35. I can't say enough, again, appreciation to the governor and for you for replenishing the motor fuel during the suspension of the excise tax, so that our critical transportation projects and maintenance and everything that we do has continued to drive forward, and we have not had to stop or even had a hiccup. So thank you, thank you, and thank you for that recognition of how critical transportation is, especially when gas was so expensive. So to the left is what is called the Transportation Trust Fund, which was created out of HB 105 back in 2020. And that aggregates the fee components that were created out of HB 170. The hotel fee, the alternative vehicle fuel fee, and the annual heavy vehicle impact fees. All those aggregate together into a transportation trust fund. And I would like to highlight again that on the alternative vehicle fee for electric vehicles, basically, that is basically a combination of what state and federal excise tax would be on an average for an average car. So that is trying to, again, for EV owners to be able to contribute to transportation funding such that we can provide good infrastructure. So that's equivalence, basically. Down at the bottom left under the state is the Transit Trust Fund, which comes from the rideshare fees. Those dollars are dedicated to transit projects by statute. So plus then we have some general funds we'll talk about later. So that totals about 2.3 in the FY23 base. If you flip over to the right side of that, you can see the federal spend. The biggest part of the $1.6 billion comes from federal highway at $1.5 billion, which is derived from the federal excise tax, which is 18.4 cents, and then a lot of general funds, and especially related to the bipartisan infrastructure law, and I'll talk about that in a moment. The federal aviation money is, we're a state block grant state, so this is basically sort of grant money that we have to apply for with local airports and administer. So we administer the federal aviation funds at $46.5 million. Same thing with Federal Transit Administration. There is formula funding for rural and small urban transit, and also obviously large urbans handled differently here in Metro Atlanta. $45.7 million. And then there are funds available through the Federal Railroad Administration or Rail Administration. It's all grant money. You have to apply for those grants, discretionary grants. So, pardon me. So now we see where the funding comes from the state level. Let's see how it relates to our budget programs on the next slide. I'll just show you this to show that there's 13 budget programs at the state level, and we'll take a deeper dive into those budget programs in a minute. But I'll show you this slide because it informs the next couple of slides with the federal. These 13 state budget programs have to marry up to the federal budget programs that exist. So on the next slide is a little bit about the bipartisan infrastructure law. Truly the biggest infrastructure investment made in our nation. A little $1.2 trillion over 5 years. I'll say that again, $1.2 trillion over 5 years. About 45% of that went to transportation. There's been a lot of misunderstanding about the bipartisan infrastructure law. I think everybody thought it was all new additive money. But what the bipartisan infrastructure law did was basically reauthorize the federal transportation funding over a 5-year period, plus it had increases. The increases on average in the first year, which was federal fiscal year 22, was about 20%. And on aggregate, it grows about 2% a year to the year 2026, federal 2026, which then would be about 30% more federal funding. More federal money means it takes more state dollars to match the federal money, usually 80% federal, 20% state. And as I look at these buckets, I always like to oversimplify this, is the blue bucket is our normal formula programs that are based on population and all kind of requirements federally. The yellow bucket was some new formula programs. I'll show you what those are. There's a whole bunch, like $89 billion of discretionary money that was in the infrastructure bill. You have to compete and try to win that. And the last was some policy and programs, which that's the Home Depot bucket, by the way. It's in policies and programs. So, you know, when we think about percentages, these percentage increases, 20%, 22%, all the way up to 30%. Percentages are sometimes misleading, right? I always remember the saying 100% of a penny is what? A penny, right? So percentages increases, you have to watch. And I do, before I move on too, though, is this recognition of increased federal funding requires increased match funding. I certainly want to again give appreciation for our budget and the recognition of both House and Senate of addressing that last year, which helps us address fiscal year 22 and 23, and I'll come back to that. So let's go to the next slide. These are some of the federal programs. In fact, there's the 13 state programs, there's 18 federal programs, and then sub-programs under those 18 that we have to marry state funds and federal funds together. But let me just highlight the percentages. As I said, on aggregate 20%, but different programs got different percent increases. Thank goodness our safety program got the biggest increase at 24%. In 2021, we had 1,827 deaths on Georgia's roadways. 2022, we're still finalizing that, but the number was down to 1,785. And so far, in just 17 days in January, there's been 55 deaths on our roadways. Any number is too many in fatalities, but everything we do has a safety benefit. So it's not just the safety funding. Every program we do, we are always focused on safety, but we've got to drive those numbers down. But I highlight a couple of things. As we continue to use rail, which is very important to get trucks off the road, you can see that the rail highway crossing got no funding increase. And in fact, the National Freight Program, which seems to be a little obscured, actually federally lost money. So we got some increases in some buckets, and every one of these buckets or sub-buckets has specific uses of how you can use the money. Regrettably, the federal government does not send us a big check and say, good luck and God bless and use it wisely. We have to spend our money in alignment with the rules and then get reimbursed, and that happens pretty efficiently. The yellow represents the yellow buckets that I showed you. New programs, carbon reduction, protect, a little bit of money for bridges on fair condition. A lot of that money goes to local bridges, which is very critical. In electric vehicle charging, again, this is Georgia advancing e-mobility, our e-mobility future with all these great jobs and investments in e-mobility. This money will work with the private sector to deploy DC fast chargers around the state along our interstates, such that you can get from place to place and be able to charge your electric vehicle in the future. So how are all these funds and these programs used? On the next slide is a very complicated pie chart, but it really does a great job of laying out of where these dollars are used by program. And this is a combination of federal and state funds, and we're going back to fiscal year 22 to show you what we completed and to go back. So the other thing I'll tell you is we have a great accountability and investment report online. This is in there if you want to take a deeper dive. It shows where these dollars are used. Please search that out. It's a very handy document to see where money's used. But I'll just highlight you see the big blue and sort of the green colors there. Our largest program by dollars and percentage is our capital construction project. Building projects is 46% at $1.86 billion. The next category is taking care of our system, our routine maintenance, state of good repair, of just keeping the house, as I like to call it, is at 11%. Capital maintenance, again, rehabilitation, reconstruction, repaving roads, rehabilitating bridges, comes in at 8%. A wonderful program for your cities and your counties is the Local Maintenance Improvement Grant Program, that formula funding that goes out to every city and county. It represents 10% of our excise tax, but it's about 5% of the overall budget when you combine federal and state. Again, intermodal, airports, rail, aviation, and waterways, $168 million, about 4%. And then traffic management, taking care of the roadways, the traffic signals, the signs, our hero operators, our champ operators on the interstate come in about 4%. So I like to aggregate all those together because that's the doing. Those are the tangible outcomes you see of what we do out on Georgia's transportation networks. And that constitutes about 78% of the total budget amount. So that's a really good news story. And then about 4% is in something called program delivery, sort of the purple color near 11 o'clock or maybe 12 o'clock on the pie chart there. And that's everything it takes to get projects ready so that we can get them out and get them built, get them deployed, which is about 4%. And I would highlight too, GDOT admin over on this corner there, only 2% of the total budget. So we try to be lean and effective in administration and everything that we do to maximize those dollars to go out to get more things done on Georgia's roadways and transportation network. Third, on the column on the right, Third down, again, I want to again say thank you for the recognition of the IIJA match, increasing our funding such that we could match those additional funds. So the total was about $106 million that was appropriated. We used part of that to do federal fiscal year 22. Now we're using the other part of that to work into federal fiscal year 23. So thank you for that. But as I showed you, every year there's a 2% increase, so it's going to take more and more money to match the federal so that we cannot take that out of our other programs. Next, just sort of a drill down into a little more granular of where this money is being used. This is look back at fiscal year 22 and then fiscal 23 year to date. So everything it takes from an outsourced effort of professional services of designers and geotechnical analysis and everything it takes, environmental work, everything it takes to deliver a project. In 2022, we did 1,120 contracts valued at $628 million. And in 23, so far year to date, we've done 889 professional service contracts valued at $453 million. Think about this. Every time we expand a roadway, do an intersection or project, you have to buy property. In 2022, we bought 1,555 parcels. So far, year to date, 796 in this budget year. So think about that. You have to develop a plat. You have to appraise a piece of property. You have to go negotiate with a property owner that probably didn't want to sell their property to begin with. Then you have to get to a closing to close that out before we ever advance a project. So it's a tremendous amount of work, and a lot of work goes into that. Now, the bottom two is construction projects awarded. And let me go say that, awarded. That means those are ones that we actually move forward with, that we accepted the low bid and move forward. In 2022, we did 279 projects awarded at $1.56 billion. In 2022, I might add, we rejected 23 bids totaling about $352 million. Due to the high prices and everything that the contracting industry is going through. And let me just say, this is not their fault. They're having to bid commodity and supply chain increases that is real, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. That was an 8% bid rejection rate. I've worked at DOT for 31 years. I've never remembered seeing us reject so many bids. And they were competitive bids. Let me make sure that's clear. These are all competitive bids. But just the world we live in, we just couldn't advance those projects. So, and I'll come back to that. 2023, 149 projects to date at $937 million. We project to close out this fiscal year by bidding $2.26 billion in projects. So that's quite an increase from last year. We should total about 392 projects bid by June of this year. So far this year, we've rejected 13 projects valued at about $189 million. So we look at repackaging those, either making them smaller so that the contractor doesn't have to bid as much risk. We have delayed projects, especially back this summer when asphalt prices were so high because fuel was so high. They're a direct correlation, and so we just deferred bidding those projects to try to get more favorable bids and use our taxpayer dollars wisely. This next slide shows what the true impact is. This is becoming our new normal, and we pulled this data from our bid information back to May because that was the end of the previous fiscal year going into this current fiscal year, where the average low bid, let me say it again, the average of the lowest bids we received that we accepted was 122% above what we budgeted for. So we're able to justify those prices. We're able to get to award to our contractors to deliver those projects. But you can see by breaking out of these categories sort of the difference, the increase that we're seeing in our budgeting process, resurfacing up to 123%, with a maximum of widening projects going from a 2-lane road to a 4-lane road coming in about 149% higher. So this is our new normal as we adjust our bids based on real world bidding information and commodity information. Those percentages are going down, but the costs haven't gone down. A lot of the costs have gone down a little bit and beginning to stabilize. We're seeing a little less volatility. And some of that volatility is down on that bottom box. And this is just some snapshots over the last year or so of the, product increases. Raw material like steel have seen 300% increases. Concrete's gone up, storm drain pipes, and everything, especially in concrete and cement. There have been shortages of cement, so contractors are being rationed. They can't get the concrete they need. There's been driver shortages with concrete plants that they can't deliver concrete at night. None of you like us working in the road during the day. People reaffirm that to me over and over. So trying to work at night is even a problem in many areas. And it's not just Metro Atlanta. In Augusta, for instance, we're building a new interchange right outside Augusta in Columbia County, and we couldn't get enough concrete to pave the ramp all in one day. Had to do it in multiple sections. So those are real world examples that we're dealing with. Again, we're trying to be strategic in how we deliver these projects to maximize the taxpayers' dollars and use them as effective as possible. If you remember back at the biennial, this is where I gave you the Charles Dickens quote, right, of A Tale of Two Cities. It's the best of times because we just talked about great revenues from bipartisan infrastructure law, and the state budget is really good. The worst of times is this is where the money's going into increased costs. The good news is we're keeping our head at water level. Every now and then we'll go underwater and we'll come back up and get some air, and we're beginning to stabilize. So very important that we think about how we continue to advance Georgia to be the #1 state to do business, and it takes tremendous investment, obviously. But it's not just the projects that we bid. This is what we're seeing in maintenance. The I-95 comprehensive maintenance contract, basically we hire one contractor to maintain I-95. It's a 5-year contract, so you saw a huge increase from 5 years ago when it was bid to we just rebid it, 70% increase. Just mowing the grass now is 29% increase, and certainly simple as things as herbicide to keep weeds and grass from growing and whatever, 33% increase. But you can see these increases are real and they have a big impact. So let's move into the amended 23 budget now. And what we've done on these next slide is sort of tableized your budget reports that you have in front of you. And I'll try to give you a page number to link up, but we try to simplify a little bit to a view of time. So let's start with amended 23. Basically what you see is an add of $89.43 million to bring the total budget for amended 23 to $2.3 billion. In the excise, basically there was a little over $1.1 billion of other funds, basically to replace the motor fuel, and some $89 million of interest earnings. Interest rates are up, so interest earnings on motor fuel added $89 million. The other add here is there was GRETA, the Georgia Regional Transportation Authority, previously was assigned over to Department of Community Affairs budget. It's being linked back to the State Road and Tollway budget, so we just added $351,000 back to the budget to cover their the GRETA operations there. So really pretty straightforward. Let me just talk about the, again, transit trust funds. I told you what those were. They remain the same. The transportation trust funds did the same, and state general funds basically remained the same as well. So that gives us our amended 23 budget. This is a bar chart of that big pie chart I showed you, but we've aggregated the main budget programs together to sort of give you a sense of where the money goes. Again, in capital projects, that's capital construction, capital maintenance, and then a local roads project where we work with federal dollars on city and county projects. Total $1.13 billion. It totals 49% of the state budget. Then the next category over, the next bar over, is general operations, where we've aggregated 5 budget programs together. Administration, program delivery, again, the doing to get projects ready to be bid, data collections, which is federally required, our planning division, and traffic management, which total $262 million, or about 12% of the budget. Next, again, I mentioned the local maintenance improvement grant. Shows 10% of the excise goes to them at $209,000. Next really big budget, again, is routine maintenance. Again, taking care of state of good repair is at 20%, and so forth and so on of the smaller budget categories. But this, again, just sort of shows you where the money is being utilized. On the next page, it would be similar to your page 39 and page 40 of the budget document. And what we've done is basically taken the budget programs on the left and put the fund source on the second column to combine just into one page. So the first thing you'll notice is GO bond debt. our GO bond debt actually increased by about $3.7 million due to higher interest rates. And then the biggest change you'll see there is basically a fund source swap. We're taking motor fuel, you're taking transportation trust funds totaling $86.6 million and replacing those basically with motor fuel at $90.3 million, which gives you an increase in GO bond debt of $3.7 million. It's just basically a fund swap, sort of not quite dollar for dollar, but almost. The reason it's not dollar for dollar is bond debt went up just a little bit, so we're just swapping funds there. The next category there is capital construction. Again, that's the big projects. Same thing, it just happened. We swapped fund sources and GO bond debt with capital construction. That's why you see the difference in motor fuel. Transportation fees added $86.6 million in transportation fees to capital construction and a deduct of $10.1 million, which gives an overall increase of $76.4 million to capital construction, bringing a total to almost $1 billion, $988 million. Again, let me tell you, that's very exciting to see that opportunity again to grow our capital construction program. LMIG is recognized just again to true up the 10% of the excise collection, so that brings us to $209 million. And then payments to CERTA is a small increase of $351,000 in transportation trust funds, and again, that's bringing Greta into the CERTA budget now. And so the CERTA's new total is $49 million. So everything in CERTA's budget is debt except $12.9 million, which goes to the Georgia Transportation Infrastructure Bank. And the rest of it is debt beside the Greta ad. So that's what's in that budget. On the next slide, we'll move into 2024. Again, a table of a summary of what the budget add looks like. An addition of $177 million to the base FY23 base, bringing a total to $2.389 billion, almost $2.4 billion. What happened here is an increase in excise, recognized $30 million increase in excise and $89 million in interest earnings. Again, a little more interest earnings coming in, which gave an excise a boost of $119 million. The transportation trust fund fees increased by $51 million. This is a true up based on what was collected in 2022. So the transportation trust fund and the transit trust fund is a reflection of what was actually collected in budget year 22 is appropriated into 24. So transportation fees now total $202 million. The transit trust fund fees total $23.59 million. And state general funds are reduced by $919,000, and I'll speak to that when I get to a line item. So that gives us, again, a $2.389 billion FY24 budget. The next is, again, that bar chart, just like I showed you for 23. The only difference is capital construction with that increase that I'll show you in a minute goes to 50% of the state budget instead of 49%, and operations goes down by 1%. But there's still more money across the categories, which is, again, very positive. So here again, this will be like page 41 of your budget document. Is where these dollars are being used, again, by budget program and then by fund source. Again, GO bond debt for 24 does increase due to increased interest rates. It increases by $438,000. The exact same thing in 24 as 23 with a fund source swap between transportation fees and motor fuel. Motor fuel coming in to pay bond debt, transportation fees going into capital construction program. And that's what you see on the next line item there of capital construction, $114 million net add to $1.026 billion. That's what that totals now. Capital maintenance sees a $8.785 million increase. That will help leverage more federal funds to do these capital maintenance projects, and also helps a little bit with those cost increases that I just showed you about. And so that now capital maintenance totals $154.3 million. Program delivery, as I mentioned earlier, that's the people doing the delivering of the projects, the designs, surveys, environmental, all those things that it takes to advance projects. That increase is totally reflective of the $2,000 increase and a small deduct for DOAS insurance. That's what's in that budget. On the next slide, again on your probably page 41, is the other budget programs. Department collections, again, data collections of federally required program. This just adjusts the $2,000 increase in DOS adjustments. Department admin is a $4.9 million add, which will help us advance our work in admin and basically cover the $2,000 in DOS insurance changes, plus the Teams Works billing goes to that, as well as some merit system assessments, which total $4.9 million. Another, like capital construction, routine maintenance, we're adding $6.3 million, $19.5 million. Again, to try to help some of those increased costs that we saw in all the things of sweeping and mowing and guardrail repair and pavement maintenance and all that. Out of the 19.5, about 6.3 million of that goes to the $2,000 increase and the DOAS insurance adjustments. And so the remaining traffic management is same thing, just cost of living increase and the DOS adjustment. Let me move over now on the next slide to the intermodal discussion. Again, airport aid remained the same at $26.3 million of state funds. There's no change from the base. I will tell you that we've already got a list of $54 million of airport aid requests for FY24, so I may be visiting with you later. That leverages another, the $26 million there will leverage about $46 million in airport aid, again, when you look at the federal piece. Ports is only related to the cost of living increase. That's what that adjustment is. Rail is a little tricky here. Rail actually removed $8 million of prior year dollars, state general fund dollars from the base, recognized $1.2 million we need for our rail operations, including the cost of living and DOS adjustment, but then recognized $7.063 million from local motor diesel fuel tax pursuant to HB 588. And that $7.06 billion, that would be great. $7.06 million is dedicated basically to our Class 1 rail operations based on a formulaic distribution to make transportation improvements. So that's our rail program. The transit is basically broken down into, again, two fund sources. The Transportation Trust Fund fees, again, those are those collection of transportation trust funds, increased by $5 million, again, in recognition of what was collected in 2022. So that's being added for $6.7 million. That goes for us to operate and manage the Federal Transit Administration funds and to share in the match of capital expansion for rural and small urban transit operators around the state outside of the Metro Atlanta area. And then the other part of the transit funding is the Transit Trust Fund. Again, the rideshare fees has been adjusted to $23.6 million to reflect the 2022 collections. Those dollars can be used for transit projects only across the entire state. And so that totals, that gives you the total for transit, what the dollars are used for, and I'll remind you that it's about $45.7 million of Federal Transit Administration money. The next thing is just the last two items are payment to CERTA, small decrease due to lower in debt service. Hey, that's great. Our other GO bond debt service went up. We actually, debt profile's fallen off a little bit on some of our other bond debt that CERTA holds for us. And $12.9 million of that goes toward the Georgia Transportation Infrastructure Bank, a very popular program. And lastly, the ATL, again, is a small add for the $2,000 increase in Teamworks billing. And again, that funds the ATL's operation and match for the express service that the ATL runs. Next slide, just a reminder that, hey, when it comes to transportation, we're all in this together, and when you go back home, if you're part of any of these 4 regional commission districts that passed the TIA back in 2012, we have finished the 2012 TIA projects 871 projects to be delivered. Almost all of those are delivered. We've bid some. I'm going to have to rebid some more. $1.5 billion in local funding that went right back to the locals, and we leveraged even more of that with state and federal funding. And when we added Southern Georgia in there now, over 1,000 TIA projects across these 4 regions, and there's been $1.8 billion in collections in these regions, which is doing tremendous work. And it's important that local governments make those investments so that we as a state stay the #1 state to do business. And I'll close with this. Final slide I gave you at the biennial. The future is not something we enter, the future is something we create. So we're looking forward to working with you on creating the future of transportation for Georgia that you all will be proud of. Thank you for this opportunity, and I look forward to your questions and comments.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think you loaded everybody up with plenty of information. That being said, we have passed our lunch break, but we still have one more presentation. There's been 3 lights that have been illuminated for a while. I'm going to take the 3 questions, but y'all please make them quick. And Commissioner, if you can make your answers succinct, or if they can't be, maybe y'all can take the answers offline.
Yes,
but
sir.
Representative Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Commissioner, for the work that you do. And Corbett is doing a great job at Tennell at our district office. My question is, there's a lot of projects going on, and I noticed that roundabouts are coming in. Could you explain the concept of a roundabout and the purpose of it?
I'll get around to it after this. How about that? I'll catch you in the hall. Very, very efficient, very safe. Certainly reduces crash severity greatly, and we're seeing great outcomes. Those worst crashes, T-bone crashes, and getting people injured and killed, they practically go away. So we can talk more about that. Just stay right and yield. Just remember that.
Thank you.
Representative, we'll be glad to draw you a diagram. Senator Beach.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. Can you give us a quick update on the P3 program, and is the private sector still bullish on investing in infrastructure in our state?
Thank you for that. Yeah, we're in the middle of the procurement on 16 miles of express lanes on 400. 3 truly international teams having great conversation and dialogue. I've had many meetings and conversations with our P3 program. Equity is interested in Georgia, without a doubt. Equity is looking to invest in Georgia, and we see a great future there. We have a big design build finance project rebuilding 285 and I-20 on the east interchange already under contract. You'll see some construction later this year. We are advancing I-285 on the west interchange. Again, design build, private finance. We pay them back because there's no tolls on it. But that interchange on the west side, again, the number 5 freight bottleneck in the nation. We're trying to address these big projects. But yes, things are moving well. There's a lot of interest in Georgia, and it takes big, bold projects like that to move Georgia forward.
Last question, Representative Al Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been limited. I had about 7 questions, but first thing I want.
Well, pick your best.
Boy, he's going to be a tough chairman, I can say. First, thanks for the cleanup of the right-of-ways on 16 and 95. That does more than all the marketing money we spend to be able to see who's outside of the right-of-way. But my question is, and we can get offline to answer this, but I want to know where we stand and how we're doing on our minority business or DBE programs. I certainly would like to see some numbers.
Sure. Certainly, we'll follow up on that. And the good news is we've got so much work to do. There's plenty of opportunity, and we always need everyone's help in bringing small business minority contractors to the table and continue to advance those efforts. And we're doing a lot of great work I'll talk to you about. And I've got half a ham sandwich if anybody's interested.
Commissioner, we're hoping you can divide that up like the loaves and fishes, because we might be here a while. Commissioner, thanks so much for being here, and if any other member has questions, if you don't mind catching him offline. Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Members, we have one more before lunch, so we invite the Secretary of State of Georgia to come and begin his presentation.
Hey, Russell.
Those are, I left those.
This is not yours, though, right? This is going to be a thing. I want to see it. Thanks. George, do you need our George?
He got it, I think. Yep.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, let's get circled up here. The secretary is the only thing between us and lunch. So I hope you heard that, Mr. Secretary.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. I heard that.
All right, well, thank you. And with that, we will turn it over to Secretary Raffensperger.
Okay. You going to do a PowerPoint?
We have a PowerPoint. I don't have that one. I wasn't given one. Oh.
Okay. Okay, well, we'll get started here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The floor is yours.
Okay. Well, good morning, Chairman Hatchett, Chairman Tillery, and members of the committee. Thank you for allowing me to come to discuss the proposed fiscal year 24 budget and the amended 23. So many people aren't aware, but we are organized into several divisions: corporations, elections, administration, professional licensing, investigation, and securities and charities. Along with that, we have two administratively attached agencies, the Real Estate Commission and the Georgia Access to Medical Cannabis Commission. So in corporations, we are entering our fourth fiscal year where we receive no state funding. And what you'll notice that there are no state dollars going to fund this important division. We are 100% self-funded. We are self-funded because we earn expedite fees paid by users. This office processed a total of 1.4 million filings in fiscal year 22. These filings produced $106,242,900 in total revenue. And our team did that with no state dollars allocated. So those numbers reinforce what we all know, that Georgia is the #1 state to do business in America. As we go into the next fiscal year, we do have a need, though. Our corporation filing system is getting older, and you may have heard from some of your constituents. We need to do a capital project to enhance and replace the aging system. Since we are self-funded in this division, it will be difficult for us to fund the $2.8 million of estimated cost for the new system. It's a one-time cost, for the build-out and management of the project. But it is a necessary expenditure to allow us to better serve our customers in the years ahead. I guess the best example I can come with it, just like in elections, we kept the average wait time less than 2 minutes in the afternoon of November 2022. We want to keep lines short when people are trying to renew their corporations or set up their corporation. We really will bring value back to the entrepreneurs and business owners who are so critical for Georgia remaining the #1 state in business. But that then also then brings me to elections. So I believe that we've had 2 successful election cycles using the paper ballot system that you funded in 2019, which began with House Bill 316. Obviously, the environment surrounding elections has changed. It's become very litigious, as you are probably aware. When I took office back in 2019, we had about 9 lawsuits my first day that ramped up to about 15, and those have all been successfully defended. Coming into with SB 202, and then also the election that we had in 2020, we had multiple lawsuits also. What we fully expect is that Georgia will remain ground zero in the national spotlight. It's not something we want, not something we've asked for, but we just fully expect that with the election cycle of 2024 coming up, that both political parties will be having focused energies here in the state of Georgia. And we want elections in Georgia to continue to run smoothly. To that end, what we've done is we've launched phase 2 of our new voter registration system. It's called JARVIS, the Georgia Registered Voter Information Center. System, and we began that last February. Along with implementing the Election Integrity Act, our office went beyond it by launching our Visualized Data Hub. The Visualized Data Hub allowed voters to track votes cast daily during the elections by county, by ballot type, and this kind of transparency, we believe, definitely helps restore confidence in the election outcomes. We are continuing the process we began in the 2022 election of switching out and upgrading the poll pad check-in devices. About 40% of our voters in Georgia used the new poll pads in the 2022 general election. These new poll pads that cut the average check-in time to 46 seconds. If you think about that, it's just absolutely amazing. And probably my best comparison of that is Monday mornings, everyone hates those long Chick-fil-A lines. Well, guess what? Voters don't like long lines either. And having a check-in time of 46 seconds really helps the voter, get in, get to be able to vote and get out and get on to their day. We think it's just great voter experience, and also it's just, updating our technology. It also allows for visibility to the county and state as to how the processing is going, so we can track how it's going, so we can give you, the General Assembly, instant feedback if you ever want to check in because you're getting a question from any of your constituents. Further, it is part of SB 202 implementation in that it allows the total number of votes cast by election night, which includes the election day votes. We have achieved these goals using a mix of remaining bond money that we had left and the federal Help America Vote Act, HAVA dollars. But as I mentioned earlier, the landscape around elections has changed and requires us to continually invest in improvements. So we have some plans to help voters in counties and continue to implement SB 202. With that in mind, we ask your help in funding the following items. Number 1, we need to replace and upgrade the uninterruptible power supplies, the battery packs, for all of our ballot marking devices. The current UPS is a lead-based battery. It's robust. It also weighs 80 pounds. Our average poll worker has an age of over 65 years old, and it's a burden. The weight of the replacement UPS is about 30 pounds, and it allows the replacement battery unit into the unit will extend the life of the UPS to potentially a full decade. The estimated cost to replace them is about $4 million. This is also would include the removal and environmentally safe disposal of the current UPSs. The upgraded poll pads, in order for them to do all that we in the counties need, require a data plan for early voting and election day. The 2024 election, with a presidential preference primary, the primary runoff, fall in the upcoming fiscal year. The data plan cost for all of those statewide elections is $550,000. Also, in SB 202, the Election Integrity Act, that requires a ballot image capture library to allow for review of ballots. The cost to build this out and allow for safe access is $250,000. Finally, We would like to execute enhancements to the ballot tracking that we implemented and began to implement back in the 2020 cycle, with an integration of the USPS to allow voters to track their absentee ballots within the mail stream. We also want to add enhancements to our data hub visualization. Also, we are building a tool that can allow counties to identify and investigate voter registration addresses that could be incorrect and allow for continuous list maintenance. And on that point, I want to just let people reemphasize the point that many people aren't aware of this, but studies have shown that about 11% of all Americans move every year. We have nearly 8 million voters, and 11% of that works out to be 800,000 Georgians potentially they could move. They could move into the state, out of the state, in the county, out of the county, around the precincts. And that's why to be able to update your list objectively instead of subjectively, we think really make sure that we have, accurate voter rolls. On this tool, the state would hold a master's license and the counties could get sub-licenses to use the system. The cost of all that is $625,000. We also have one thing in the amended and FY24 budget where the governor's budget repurposes 2 of our existing elections employees to directly support the state election board and their chairman. We want to provide the necessary support for them to do their duties. We understand that. But it's a different process now. It's a different state now. As I mentioned, elections have become very contentious, litigious, and have placed incredible demands on our offices, both the state election board and also the offices that we have for investigations and elections management in the Secretary of State's office. In our discussions with the chairman of the state election board, he doesn't want to do anything that hinders our office. So we would ask that there would be 2 new positions to backfill our office. So we would remain manpower neutral, but 2 additional employees would be then, tasked to work directly with the state election board. That would give them the support they need and also keep us at the level that we have been. Also, for the state election board to execute their duties, they will require some additional funding as well. We have worked with the chairman on that, and we would ask that you would please consider a travel budget for SCB members of $20,000, a budget for administrative board support overhead of $30,000, an independent website build-out of about $20,000. Currently, many of them are using their own personal Gmails or Gmail. We would like to have them something that be cyber secure, and that would be for the state election board. And an integration with our investigation system that would be approximately $30,000. So that's a good segue to move on to investigations. I'm going to make my annual appeal to you. Nothing's changed. The budget writers know this, but we need more investigators. And we need that for a lot of reasons. We have a growing state in population and also in demand. We have more license holders, professional licensing. We also have elections. We are heading into a presidential election cycle, and we also have now a record number of licensees. And I'll discuss that professional licensee section here shortly. The volume of investigation and inspections will continue to increase with our population. We would like 4 new investigators. During the COVID budget cuts, we eliminated 2 investigator positions. And in hindsight, and then having the election, post-election of 2020, we sure could have used those 2 investigators. So for 3 years now, we have been having to do even more investigations and inspections with fewer investigators. It means investigations take longer from inception. And one of the challenges with that is when they take longer, it really, I think, it allows to enter really a lack of trust or confidence. People want their answers and they will expect them right away. We do thorough investigations and it takes what it takes, but with additional investigators, we could get that done and handled more expeditiously. And during election time, we are forced to task more of our resources, so we have to reduce the resources to all the other areas, be it nursing or any other licensed professional that are required to investigate and inspect. We shift resources, manpower resources, from one area to another to really handle the situation that we have right then. We are grateful for the appropriation for 23 vehicles for our investigators to replace those that have reached the end of their useful life. We had cars out there with well over 150,000 miles on them, and we were spending lots of money on repairs just to keep them on the road. But our hardworking, post-certified investigators need vehicles, and unfortunately, the 40-year high inflation cut back the number of vehicles that we could purchase. You authorized 23, but we only had the money for 17 just due to inflation. Not your problem, not our problem. It's really the problem. It's a national problem, but that's the situation we ended up with. We would then respectfully ask that we consider appropriating dollars for these final 6 vehicles. They get us up to the 23. That would be about $120,000. As it relates to our overhead, that's the administration division. We have no proposed changes in the amended budget and only the 2,000 employee COLA in the FY 2024. We can do more with less. We're in a good shape in this division, and we're pleased with the proposal. Next up is our professional licensing division. We have 42 licensing boards that currently license 55,000 people in various trades and professions. In the last fiscal year, we saw a record 262,000 renewals and a near record of 50,206 new licenses issued. The total revenue produced from fees and fines was almost $22.1 million in that period. To give you some perspective, in our 2018 appropriated dollars for the PLB, it was $8.5 million. The state dollars appropriated for this current fiscal year, 4 years later, is $8.5 million. We continue to do more with less, but that is causing stress on our staff, and we are seeing turnover. People are just getting burnt out. And it also gets down to being able to respond to license holders. We want to be able to support the members that are on the boards so that they can get the responses that they need and they can have the paperwork flow. Because if you have members, your constituents in your districts, be it whatever license, if they feel that they're not getting a timely response, they're going to reach out to you. And we want to make sure that we have a minimization of those calls to you. We want to make sure that we can really serve the people of Georgia. We continue to see record applications, record licensure, and obviously record renewals with a 30% increase year over year. With the growth in population, we're going to continue to see that steady growth in all these areas. We are still in the process of replacing our legacy licensing system, which is over 20 years old. Hard to believe. The legislature redirected a little over $4 million in bond funds in the current budget for the replacement IT build-out. So we are going to have a go-live schedule that will begin in the spring and go through the fall. We're going to roll out the system by trade. We don't want our employees operating in 2 systems at the same time. We believe that this technology is really going to improve the response times and also the response experience that we'll be able to provide license holders. It's going to enhance user experience, and it's going to cut down on the back and forth between applicants and analysts. It will establish a dashboard for applicants so they can have visibility on the dashboard of where they are in the process and will not have to have an analyst examine an application until that application is actually complete. The applicant will see what they are lacking in real time instead of waiting for one of our staff to tell them what they're missing. We think that this automation and systematization will be key to handling the ever-increasing volume. Also, as an update, I want to let you know we are working with the engineers to stand up their independent but administratively attached board and hope to have a MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, with them quite shortly. We're also aware of the nursing shortage. So we're putting more resources towards supporting the nursing board to move as many nurses into the field as possible. And by more resources, I mean more personnel. To help in this area, we would like to have 2 new positions to process nursing licenses. Also in the new system, we will establish a direct connection to share nursing workforce information with state entities to help them address nursing shortages regionally, which will be a help to rural Georgians. This remains a priority for our office. The final division I'd like to review is Securities and Charities. This division protects Georgians and their financial futures and helps strengthens our position as the #1 state to do business. They manage a total of nearly 306,000 registrations. The total revenue that was produced from this division was nearly $13.6 million. We run the division on about 1.1. On that front there, this division manages the Invest Georgia Exemption, IGE. So far, 120 companies have taken advantage of the IGE. We are the #1 state in the country for using the Securities and Exchange Commission exemption. In fact, 50% of the capital raised under this SEC rule across the entire nation has been raised in Georgia. We're going to continue to grow our financial training programs, which is through our She Leads program, which focuses on female entrepreneurs. We also have launched a high school financial literacy program, and we will refine and expand that. Please reach out to our office if you would like to offer any of your local high schools, and we'd love to come out and present that program to you folks. We're reviewing our internal systems in this division to see what we need to do in a capital IT project to enhance and upgrade their systems, as we've had in other divisions. But this review has not reached a point where we can request additional capital dollars as of yet. But I anticipate by next year we could be asking you that with our plan. But I just wanted to give you a heads up. On the attached agencies, the main change we see is in the amended budget is for the Cannabis Commission with $120,963 to cover the cost for OSA hearings. We believe this is a necessary amendment to allow them to do their work. And real estate just keeps professionally doing their job. I anticipate fiscal year 2024 will be another year of unexpected challenges and successes. I want to thank you for the work and your time here today. I and my staff stand ready here to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
And we have the chair of the Medical Cannabis Commission here.
Yeah, I think we'll handle questions in his presentation in subcommittee. Sorry, because we are
pressed.
Trying to find time. We've had one person that's had their request to ask a question, I don't know, for a long time, and I'm going to recognize one person to ask a question, and that's Representative Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to follow up on your licensing board upgrades. From the Workforce Subcommittee of Behavioral Health, we had a significant amount of testimony about the modernization needs for this board. I'm also interested in part of that testimony that's in the report comes about your efforts to license foreign-trained professionals and the barriers there. Will your new system address new ways to make Georgia more in the mainstream to license foreign-trained professionals and from other states? Thank you.
That currently isn't on part of our program. This is really a technology upgrade, really to improve the process, but we would love to sit down with you because whatever we can do to help people become active participants in the workforce, we will certainly do. So if you want to connect us, we'll have those discussions, and we can do that while we're implementing the software. But we definitely want to make sure that we're just a welcoming place to get new professionals up and running here in the state of Georgia.
I'll follow up with you. Thank you.
Please do. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Sorry to cut things short, but I keep getting texts and messages from people and looks. So thank you, and we appreciate the job you're doing, and keep it up. And we'll look forward to hearing more in subcommittee.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, member.
We are adjourned until 12 o'clock. Till 1 o'clock. 1 o'clock. We're going to stick to the afternoon schedule. 1 o'clock.
Senate members, we have lunch for you outside the Senate Appropriations office for the Senate members.